Chapter 207. A row of new graves stood beside the grass. Everyone rested here for a day before setting off again. Without a doubt, Todoro became the most depressed person in the group. Even Sharba didn't have a good expression on his face. At the same time, Dodoro was also very depressed about the damned probability error of the life magic he used at the critical moment. Shaya, on the other hand, angrily called the mage a piece of trash. Although Dora had already mentioned that the life curse left behind by the country bumpkin, Hilafenkia, wasn't complete and that this set of life magic had flaws that were difficult to overcome, it wasn't Todoro's own will. Without the pursuit of the lizards and the leadership of the Zakutans, Shaya led Sharba, Todoro and the remaining 3 mercenaries. The 6 of them formed the final team. Fortunately, Ozwa had already told Shaya the route. As a country bumpkin who grew up in the mountains and forests, with Ozwa's guidance, this huge mountain forest was no longer a problem for Shaya. First, they went back to the stream, and then they followed the stream upstream to the north. This process lasted for about 4 days before they finally reached the source of the stream. This was a lake in the middle of the mountain forest. The surrounding lush forest and the thick layer of fallen leaves on the ground beside the lake showed that there were very few living creatures here. Shaya forbade everyone from leaving the group and moving alone. This lake gave him a bad feeling. Moreover, the map left behind by Ozwa indicated this lake, but on that very sloppily drawn map, there was a large X on the location of the lake. Clearly, on the Zakutan's map, this lake wasn't a good place. The ground beside the lake was very soft. When walking on it, every step would sink deep into the mud. "Don't stay, leave this place immediately." Shaya frowned as he looked at the calm lake. The lake water was clearly very clear, and there were no signs of danger around it. However, Shaya could not erase the uneasiness in his heart. No one had any objections to Shaya's order. After a simple replenishment of water, they hurriedly left the lake. They headed east, but after walking for less than an hour, they discovered a mountain stream in front of them. The wide gap made everyone give up on the idea of jumping over it. Even Shaya, who was the best in the team, did not have the ability to jump over the gap. This mountain stream was like a crack in the ground created by an ancient god using an axe. Standing beside the mountain stream and looking down, one couldn't see the bottom. However, one could vaguely see a cloud of black fog floating down there. Shaya seemed to be in a daze for a while as he stared at the cloud of fog. Did you hear something?" Shaya suddenly turned to look at Sharba. Sharba, who was drinking water from his water pouch, shook his head. "No, what did you hear? Maybe it's a rat or something." Shaya thought for a moment and looked around. This mountain stream was very long, extending to the left and right. If they wanted to go around it, they would have to take a lot of unnecessary detours. "Or, we can cut some vines to make a rope and find a way to climb to the other side." Sharba looked at Shaya and smiled bitterly. "I suspect that this damn mountain stream is dozens of miles long. If we go around it, we will have to walk a lot more." Shaya approved of this idea, and several mercenaries immediately took out their axes and cut down the vines in the surroundings. The trees in this mountain forest were extremely thick, and the vines climbing on them were at least as thick as a person's arm. Each vine was very tough and sturdy. Even if a strong man holding a sharp axe, he would need to use all of his strength to chop down a vine 3 to 5 times to cut it down. What was even more strange was that after the vines were cut, a large amount of viscous liquid would flow out from the cut like a human limb. It looked like blood. The viscous liquid had a strange pungent smell. When it came into contact with the hand, it would quickly cause a numbing itch. The width of the mountain stream was at least 30 meters. They were busy until it was almost dark before they finally collected enough tree vines of sufficient length. Shaya used a few ropes to tie the tree vines to a short spear that he had picked up, and the other end was directly tied to the trunk of a big tree near the mountain stream. Shaya, who had the greatest strength, grabbed the short spear tied to the tree vines and retreated a little. Then, He ran a few steps, and with the power of a run-up, he fiercely stabbed the short spear towards the other side of the mountain stream. Finally, with a puff sound, the short spear fiercely pierced into a big tree on the other side of the mountain stream, and got stuck in the trunk. Shaya pulled twice to make sure that the spear was firmly fixed. He looked at the people beside him and said, "I'll climb over first, then we'll think of a way." "Wait a moment," Todoro suddenly called out to Shaya. Then, under the puzzled eyes of the others, Todoro picked up another vine from the ground and walked to Shaya's side. He looked a little timid. "Master, tie a vine to your body. If there is an accident, there will be a guarantee." Shaya glanced at Todoro. This magician had been scolded too harshly by him on the way here. At this moment, he was clearly cowering. Shaya sighed and said in a low voice, "Thank you." A vine was tied to his waist. Sharba and the others grabbed the other end. Shaya began his first attempt. After all, he was born in the mountains. This kind of thing of walking on a single plank bridge deep in the mountains was not unfamiliar to a country bumpkin. If necessary, he could even do it more nimbly than an ape. The vine stretched across the mountain stream like a rope bridge. When Shaya walked on it, although the vine quickly caved in due to his weight and swayed a little, the country bumpkin walked very steadily. Soon, he reached the middle of the mountain stream. Sharba and the others behind him were originally holding their breaths. But when they saw that Shaya was so agile, they could not help but relax. They were about to let out a cheer or two. Suddenly, at this moment, a gust of wind came from the left side of the mountain stream from upstream of the huge cliff. This gust of wind came without warning, as if it had suddenly swept over. The vine bridge that Shaya was on was suddenly blown up high by the gust of wind, rippling like a swing. Shaya, who was standing on top of it, suddenly shouted out loudly and his body fell down. Sharba and the others who were behind him cried out in shock at the same time. As his body was falling down, Country Bumpkin used both his feet to hook onto the vine. Only then did he not fall down. However, the gust of wind seemed to be growing stronger. The vine swayed back and forth in the gust of wind. Shaya, whose head was facing down, was unable to open his eyes due to the gust of wind. All he could do was desperately hook onto the rope with both his feet. Relying on his great strength and flexibility, he forced himself to bend down and use both his hands to hold onto the vine. Even so, he was like a leaf in the midst of a gust of wind, being blown up and down. Finally, "Pa!" The crisp sound of something breaking could be heard clearly by everyone. Perhaps the gust of wind was too strong, causing the vine to sway too much. In the end, it broke apart in the middle. Shaya, who was holding onto the vine, did not even have the chance to shout out. Instead, he cried out loudly and fell into the mountain stream. "Damn it!" Sharba shouted out loudly. He and the other mercenaries quickly grabbed onto the end of the vine that was connected to Shaya's body. Sure enough, a pulling force was quickly transmitted over. Sharba and the others held onto it tightly. After feeling the force of Shaya's falling body, they desperately pulled back. Sharba continued to shout out loudly, "Shaya? Shaya? You're not dead, right?" He shouted a total of 5 or 6 times before he finally received a reply from Shaya. Country Bumpkin's voice came from the mountain stream. "Lao Tzu is not dead. Damn it, I hit the mountain wall." A branch almost stabbed into Lao Tzu's eye. Sharba laughed. This guy grinned and breathed a sigh of relief. "Don't move, we'll pull you up." He turned back and shouted, "Brothers, use all your strength." The vine dragged tightly onto the cliff edge of the mountain stream, making a caw-caw sound from the friction. After pulling for a few meters, they suddenly heard Shaya shouting from below, "Stop! Quickly stop! Stop! What's wrong?" Sharba immediately hugged the vine. "Let go! Let me down!" In the mountain stream, Shaya's voice carried a kind of surprise. "Damn it! There seems to be something below. It's too far, Lao Tzu can't see clearly. Let me down. Damn it! Slow down, don't let go too fast." Country Bumpkin felt that his breathing was not smooth. When he fell from above just now, fortunately, the vine tied to his waist pulled him, but the force of the fall was all wrapped around Shea's waist. It was so painful that he almost fainted. The tree vines wrapped tightly around his waist, and he immediately found it difficult to breathe. Due to the force of the fall, he was pulled back by the tree vines. When his body slammed into the mountain wall, a protruding branch on the mountain wall almost poked his forehead. Even if Shea's body had been strengthened by the dragon's blood, such a violent poke made his eyes turn black from the pain. And, if that part of his body was 2 fingers wide on the ground, it would have directly poked into Country Bumpkin's eye. He was still in a head-down position. All the blood in his body rushed to his head, making him feel dizzy. If he maintained this position for too long, he even suspected that his brain would be congested. But fortunately, he grabbed onto the mountain wall. Shea reluctantly hugged a raised stone and adjusted his position before he breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, his body was submerged in the black fog in the mountain stream. He looked up, but the fog was hazy and he could not see anything above. And in this fog, Shea only felt that the air that he breathed into his nose was damp and had an unbearable moldy and rotten smell. This smell reminded him of the goblin's bathwater. Just when he heard Sharba's roar from above, and was about to climb up, Shea very coincidentally looked down completely subconsciously. Just a glance. The fog below seemed to have thinned out a lot. Shea hung on the mountain wall, and seemed to be able to vaguely see the bottom of the mountain stream. Although it was still a little fuzzy, but in the haze, some strange silhouettes made Shea somewhat curious. After he stopped Sharba, he felt that the vines above listened to his words. After they lowered the vines bit by bit, Shea gasped for breath and used his strength to loosen the vines around his waist. First, he let his breathing become smoother. Then, he felt around in his arms and took out a branch. Then, he used a cloth soaked in some special plant powder to wrap the branch. Then, he quickly took out a torch from his arms and struck it twice. With a bang, a flame was ignited. Soon, the ointment on the cloth was ignited. This fire-making thing was learned from the Zaku people. It was a good thing to make a fire by smashing the fruit of a plant that grew in the mountains. Holding the small torch, Shea shook it in his hand. Then, he took a deep breath and threw the small torch down below him. The flame passed through the black fog, swayed, and finally fell to the bottom of the valley. To Shea's relief, the bottom of the valley was a dry place and not a river. The torch was about 10 meters high from his position, and with the help of the flame in the fog, although it was still very fuzzy, the clarity was enough for the Country Bumpkin with keen vision to see a lot of things clearly. After seeing it clearly, the Country Bumpkin's eyes immediately widened. Release. Release. Continue to release. Shea shouted loudly, and then pulled the vines bit by bit and carefully climbed down the mountain wall. But unfortunately, when he shouted release for the 10th time, Sharba's roar came from above. Because it was too far away, or because of the strange black fog, Sharba's voice sounded a little fuzzy. Vines. And length. Not enough, Shea sighed. At this moment, he was still 5 or 6 meters away from the bottom of the mountain stream. He hesitated and shouted, "Wait for me! Don't pull the rope. When I tell you to pull, pull again." After receiving Sharba's response from above, Shea took a deep breath and then quickly untied the vines around his waist. The distance from the ground was only 5 or 6 meters. This height was not difficult for Shea. He quickly and skillfully found a few footholds on the mountain wall, and finally jumped down lightly and skillfully. The bottom of the mountain stream was very narrow. It could be said that if the entire mountain stream was cut horizontally, then its shape would be V. The bottom of the valley was only about 3 or 4 meters wide. After Shea landed, he immediately felt the hardness of the ground under his feet. With a bang, the soles of his feet were a little numb. He immediately picked up the torch on the ground that he had thrown down before. The torch was only 1/3 burned. Shea held it in his hand and shook it. There was almost no vegetation at the bottom of the mountain stream, not even any thorns or dead branches. But when Shea picked up the torch, he alarmed a fat rat. That thing wriggled its fat body, and quickly ran away in alarm. Shea stood at the bottom of the valley, looked in front, and then turned his head to look behind. Under the light of the torch, Shea's expression was very strange. He took a deep breath, as if talking to himself. God! Look what I found! The ground was littered with broken armors and weapons, as well as some decaying skeletons. These things were all over the place. How to describe such a place? There was no doubt that this was the remains of an ancient battlefield. At the bottom of this narrow mountain stream, if you stood inside, you would feel that it was like a narrow passageway. Now Shea was standing in the middle of this passageway, and all he could see in front and behind him were some broken, decayed, and strange-looking weapons, armor, and skeletons. Unlike the obviously Byzantium-style armor, these remnants were more peculiar in style. In today's world, Byzantium was recognized as the country with the highest armor-making skills. Byzantium's hill armor was already considered a very advanced type of armor. Shea himself had a very good set of hill armor. However, standing here, with just a glance, Shea immediately confirmed something that even he himself was surprised about. These ruins, these ancient ruins that had been around for who knows how many years. The remnants of these things, not to mention other things, just the armor alone seemed to be much more advanced than the Byzantine Empire's hill armor. Yes, without a doubt it was advanced and in the lead. The closest thing to Shea was a skeleton leaning against the mountain wall. The owner of the skeleton was probably sitting on the ground before he died, his back pressed tightly against the mountain wall and his head hanging down. When Shea walked over, a mouse about the size of Shea's fist was crawling on the other party's helmet. With a squeak, it slipped away. Shea quickly grabbed the helmet. This was a spherical helmet, unlike the general's helmet commonly used by the Byzantium people, and also unlike the horned helmets used by the Odin people. Its round shape looked somewhat ridiculous, but what surprised Shea was, this round helmet was actually a complete whole. When he held it in his hand, he could clearly feel that it was a complete whole. It was not nailed together with pieces of iron. Rather, it appeared to be a complete iron helmet. Although Shea was not proficient in blacksmithing, he understood that such a complete round helmet without any seams was something that none of the blacksmiths he knew of in Byzantium had the ability to produce. The helmets of the present day were generally made from pieces of steel or iron that had been tempered. Then, they would be pieced together and the seams would be hammered with protruding steel nails. That way, it would look impressive and at the same time ensure its sturdiness. However, this helmet was like using a tool that had molten iron poured into it. After cooling down, it would become a complete iron bowl. However, Shea understood that producing a helmet was not that easy. To produce such an iron bowl-like helmet, it was not as simple as pouring molten iron into it. Good metal materials needed to be hammered to remove impurities. If one were to simply pour molten iron into it, then perhaps one might be able to produce an iron bowl. However, the materials used would inevitably be impure. More importantly, the helmet was round and did not appear to be deformed. In other words, it was definitely not hammered out by blacksmith. Tossing the round helmet to the side, Shea bent over to carefully examine the armor of this dead fellow who had been dead for who knows how many years. Without a doubt, the style of this armor was completely different from any armor that Shea knew of. Firstly, it did not use something similar to a breastplate. Instead, it used a nearly complete ancient plate armor. Logically speaking, such a plate armor had a very strong defensive capability against blunt weapons. However, it lacked the necessary function against sharp weapons such as bows and arrows. However, this set of plate armor was mostly shaped with a protruding spherical surface, which made up for this very high point. Shea looked at the hand of this skeleton. There was an iron rod that was only about 10 centimeters long. He picked it up and saw that its surface was already covered with green embroidery. Shea weighed it in his hand. Or perhaps it was more like an iron rod. The two ends were thick and the middle was thin. Additionally, there was something similar to a handguard in the middle. Holding it in his hand, Shea could feel that the weight of this item was much heavier than it looked. There was also a small trigger-like item on the handle. Shea tried pressing it twice. Probably due to the passage of time, something inside had rusted. After pressing it twice, Shea did not receive any response. He tried knocking on the stone twice. Immediately, fine iron shavings fell out from within. When he pressed the trigger again, caw-caw! After two muffled sounds, the two ends of the iron rod suddenly opened up into a circular iron plate. It was like a folding fan. The thick iron plate was formed by stacking one piece at a time. Once it opened up, it became a complete and exquisite circular hand shield. Yes, this was a retractable shield. This kind of craftsmanship, perhaps even the dwarves might not be able to produce something like this. Shea was stunned. Looking at the small shield in his hand, he stared blankly for a good while. Then, without hesitation, Shea pulled out an empty cloth bag from his bosom and threw the item inside. Looking around, he saw that the passageway at the bottom of this mountain stream was filled with fallen skeletons. These fellows had died at an unknown time. The armor they wore and the weapons they used were all things that Shea had never seen before. What surprised Shea even more was that these skeletons were lying on the ground. Some of them were lying on the ground, dead. However, they clearly did not have any wounds on them. In other words, the skeletons of these skeletons that were left behind were almost complete. There were no signs of fatal wounds caused by weapons. What surprised Shea even more was that he quickly overturned his speculation that this was an ancient battlefield. The reason for that was simple. All of the deceased skeletons and the weapons they used appeared to be of the same style. In other words, the deceased skeletons here should belong to the same group. None of the skeletons looked like they were left behind by enemies. Looking around the mountain stream, Chen Xiaoyan estimated that there were at least thousands of such skeletons. In fact, there might be even more in the distance. So many corpses. If they were an army, judging from the equipment they were wearing, this was clearly an elite army. However, so many elites had died silently in this place, in this dark valley where they couldn't see the light of day. They died in such an obscure manner. These fellows don't look like they were killed. Along the way, Shea had been collecting these strange armors and weapons. However, he quickly gave up on that. There were simply too many of them. These fellows. Look at these skeletons and corpses. They appeared very calm when they died. Could they have committed suicide? After saying that, Shea was unable to stop himself from shaking his head. Impossible. In this place there are at least several thousand of these fellows. There might be even more in the distance. For an elite army with such equipment, even in a moment of crisis, they would not choose to commit mass suicide. What surprised Shea even more was that after walking for over 100 meters, he had seen so many corpses. Additionally, the weapons used by these fellows, or rather, the weapons that Shea had picked up surprised him. The shape of the blades and swords did not appear too different from those of the present day. The only difference was that the size of these weapons were not too big. They were short blades and short swords. However, not every corpse was equipped with these combat-type weapons. What Shea saw more were the skeletons that had died within the valley. However, there was something that looked like an iron pipe placed beside them. Iron pipe, that was naturally what Shea had called it. Truth be told, these things were about the length of a short spear and the thickness of an arm. One end was hollowed out and the inside was round while the other end was made into a support. Shea picked one up and tested it a few times. Then, he found the knack for it. It appeared this was a long-range weapon similar to a crossbow. However, its shape was much bigger than a crossbow. However, Shea did not see any crossbow bolt. Clearly, this is a long-range weapon similar to a crossbow. It is a firing device. However, what is the thing that is fired out? Shea frowned. Another thing that surprised him was that all these iron pipes, the pipes inside, were polished to a very smooth state. There were no flaws at all. Finally, after walking forward for a while, Shea's question was answered by a big object in front of him. A huge metal frame was placed in the middle of the mountain stream. One of the two metal wheels on the frame was rotten, causing the thing on top to be tilted to the side. A thick circular iron pipe was placed on top of the frame. Perhaps it was not made of iron. Shea immediately understood the shape of this thing. This looks like a cannon. The Byzantine Empire had cannons, Lantis had cannons, and Odin had them as well. However, the cannons of this world were not weapons. They were more of a ceremonial object. Its only function was to fire fireworks. Shea had seen the ceremonial cannons in the imperial capital. Those things were all like this. There were wheels underneath. Every time it was fired, the people beside it would stuff it with some special materials and then ignite it. With a bang, it would spray out colorful fireworks that would make children cheer during festive celebrations. However, this thing before him was clearly not a ceremonial object. The base of the cannon was a square object. Shea carefully inspected it for a while. After using the fire fork to knock away most of the rust, he was able to see some faint patterns on it. It looks like. Shea hesitated. No need to doubt it. These are the patterns of magic arrays. Dora sighed in his mind. Look at the barrel of the cannon. There are also these patterns. Moreover, they must be spiral patterns. Shea immediately inspected it carefully. Sure enough, it was as Dora had said. Congratulations, kid. What you found is a treasure that has been completely extinct in this world for so long. If you can bring this thing outside in one piece, then any great magician would be willing to exchange all of their wealth for it. Although the contents of Dora's words were inspiring, her tone clearly carried a deep sense of mockery. What exactly is this thing? Shea frowned. It is very simple. Have you heard of magic cannons? Dora smiled and said, Of course you have not heard of it. Kid, it is because a country bumpkin like you does not even know about the history of the Demon War. In fact, there are many truths that ordinary people do not know about. These things are only in the hands of a small number of the top echelons of your human world. For example, those great magicians have the opportunity to see the mysterious ancient books that have been passed down since ancient times. Shea pursed his lips and knocked on the metal frame that was mostly rotten. This thing is very powerful? Powerful? Dora snorted. According to legend, the magic cannon is a magical weapon. It is the best weapon that combines machinery and magic. Its power is incomparably powerful. Additionally, according to legend, the most powerful magic cannon can kill a dragon with just one shot. One shot, a dragon? Shea opened his mouth, and the country bumpkin immediately widened his eyes to carefully examine the thing. Then, he shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, it is rotten. Then, he suddenly thought of something. Then, those iron pipes, could they be magic cannons? From what I can see, those iron pipes are a bit like the miniature version of the magic cannon that you are talking about. Congratulations, you guessed it right again. Dora's voice was very gloomy. Those things, if I remember correctly, in the ancient books they are called magic fire. These things are weapons that use magic power. You can understand it as a crossbow with magic power. According to legend, one shot of magic fire can easily kill an elite warrior. Magic cannon, magic fire. Shea looked around. Magic cannon that can easily kill a dragon. Magic fire that can easily kill a warrior. Damn, these dead things, where did they come from? These fellows have such powerful equipment. How did they all die in this damned place? Dora sighed and her laughter rang out in Shea's mind. The laughter was filled with disdain and ridicule. Human. Arrogant human. You have actually guessed it, but your subconscious mind is unwilling to think of that possibility, right? Shea's face suddenly changed. He quickly ran over to the skeletons and picked them up one by one to carefully observe them before throwing them away. These things, based on their physique, were clearly some kind of high-level creature that could walk upright. However, based on their physique, they were much shorter than humans. Their physique was similar to the dwarves, but they were not as majestic as the dwarf. They appeared thinner and weaker. They are not humans. They are much shorter than humans. They are not elves. Although I have never seen elves, I have heard that their physique is similar to humans. Shea's breathing was somewhat hurried. They are not dwarves. Dwarves are more majestic than these things. Could they be? They are. Shea took a deep breath and his face suddenly became very interesting. They are goblins. Dora's voice had a malicious smile. Congratulations, you have found the ancient, real, dominant race of this world, the real goblins. Goblins? Seeing such a group of ancient, real goblins. Looking at these things that Shea should be very familiar with, wearing more elite and advanced armor than humans, and using more powerful weapons than humans, there was no doubt that if these dead goblins were really an army, then excluding the combat strength of the individual warriors, just based on their equipment alone, it was enough to overwhelm any elite Byzantine army that Shea knew of. What was this feeling? You can imagine, a group of despicable and ignorant monkeys that only knew how to scream, "Okey-oke," did not bathe all year round, and would kill each other for a small bag of food, suddenly fully armed, in the form of the most sophisticated and rigorous group of living creatures, in the form of an army, appeared in front of you and looked very powerful. I know what you are thinking, boy. Dora's voice became very serious. These are real goblins. Real creatures with advanced intelligence. They are different from those things that only know how to scream, "Okey-oke." In ancient times, these fellows were the rulers that ruled over all other races. After a pause, Dora whispered, "According to the ancient books that I have read, I have never heard of anyone finding any complete ruins of the goblin civilization. Look around, maybe you can find something else." First 9,000 words. Starting today, I have to catch up with the progress. I will write all night tonight. Haha, I will update after I finish writing. There will definitely be an update at night, but you don't have to stay up late to wait. Get up tomorrow and read it. I will work hard to catch up with the progress and work hard to make up for the workload. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 208. GOR Chapter 195. Their era. The country bumpkin's emotions were somewhat sluggish. After Dora anxiously urged him several times, he continued to walk unsteadily. Real goblins. This answer was a little too shocking for him. This was actually a scene that hurt Shea's human self-esteem. Imagine, those dirty, despicable and ignorant goblins that were like a group of primitive monkeys were actually a higher race that was many times more advanced than humans. In ancient times, they had already created so many civilizations that were far superior to today's human civilization. Although Shea had heard Dora say this before, but in most cases, he would not take this statement too seriously in his heart. After all, there was no direct evidence, this statement was just a statement. But now, the ironclad facts in front of him, he had no choice but to believe it. These were goblins in front of him. Goblins. Those goblins who called, "Okey-oke." After walking for a while in the mountain stream, he seemed to be looking for something, but in fact, he did not know what he was looking for. When Dora said, "Find something else," Shea did not understand the meaning of this. In front of him was just a group of dead people. No, dead goblins. He had no choice but to accept it. Soon, he found evidence of another civilization. A strict hierarchy. He always had a fluke thought. These goblins were damn stupid goblins. It was just that he did not know who gave them such powerful equipment. But after seeing the later discoveries, the country bumpkin was finally completely speechless. After walking for about 100 meters, Shea found a big shot. He could see at a glance that the skeletons in front of him were somewhat different. First of all, the strange style of armor was not the same as the other dead goblins. Obviously, this was a higher-level symbol. Near the mountain wall, in a concave part of the mountain wall, sat the skeleton of a goblin. This guy did not have the iron pipe that Dora called magic fire beside him. Instead, he wore a very unique long saber. Of course, after countless years, the saber had rusted to the point that it almost turned into stone. "I think there's something strange about the fog above the valley," Dora said in a guessing voice in his mind. "This fog blocks the outside light and also blocks the circulation of air. And maybe the fog has a kind of rotting element, so these goblin corpses can be preserved for so long and still be so intact. If placed elsewhere, they would have rotted into dregs." The reason why Shea said that the one in front of him was a big shot was because of the appearance of the corpses around this guy. It was obvious that the 7 to 8 dead gnomes were surrounding the skeleton in the middle. Moreover, from the looks of their skeletons, it seemed like they were all kneeling. Or it could be said that in the last moment of their lives, they were also kneeling there, facing the goblin in the middle. Although many years had passed and some of the skeletons had already collapsed, one could still see the direction in which they were kneeling. As for the skeleton in the middle, it was sitting upright in the concave wall of the mountain. Its head was tilted down. Shaya tried to pick up its helmet, but he accidentally knocked the head to the ground, and it immediately rolled far away. The skull that fell on the ground, its empty eye sockets seemed to be staring at Shea faintly, making the country bumpkin feel a little scared. He hesitated for a moment, walked over, picked up the skull, and put it back on the skeleton's spine, then put the helmet back on. But this action led to an unexpected discovery. Probably because the skeleton was so rotten that it could no longer support it, Shea just put the helmet on this guy, and with a crash, the entire skeleton fell apart, turning into a messy pile of bones. Looking at the pile of bones in front of him, Shea smiled helplessly. He crouched down and tried to pick up the helmet, but then he saw something. This was where the skeleton was originally sitting. Under its seat was a square box. Shea immediately picked up the item and weighed it in his hand. It seemed to be very heavy. Well, it was indeed a box made of some unknown metal. But after looking at it for a while, Shea helplessly found that he did not know how to open it. There were no gaps in this item, just like an iron brick. Maybe it was originally an iron brick. The country bumpkin muttered to himself. However, just as Xiaya was about to throw it to the ground, it suddenly hit some unknown mechanism when it landed on the ground. Ka! The iron box suddenly opened by itself, and cracks appeared on both sides. At the same time, with a chi sound, a white mist emerged from the cracks. Shea quickly picked up the item and opened the box. Inside the box was a book. Or more accurately, it was an iron book. When he flipped open the first page, Shea was surprised to find that every page of this book was made of thin metal. Strange symbols were densely recorded on the metal page. These were probably the goblin language. Seeing this, Shaya suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart. These symbols and words were very strange and gave him a faint sense of familiarity. Some of the symbols were even somewhat similar to the human words that he knew, but he just couldn't recognize them. These symbols were even more complicated. Goblin language? Shea sighed. Do I have to bring this back to Lao Tzu and show it to Skyattack? I'm afraid that fellow won't be able to learn the words of its ancestors. Dora harumphed inside his mind and said, Don't talk nonsense, kid. Put the item beside the pendant and let me have a closer look. Shea had no choice but to follow Dora's instructions. Soon, Dora's exclamation could be heard in his mind. It really is the goblin language. Oh God! I am seeing the real goblin language. Moreover, it is such a complete one. Dora appeared to be pleasantly surprised in his mind. She then uttered out some strange note. Percent times. However, after chanting for a while, she seemed to be stuck. Her voice became vague and hesitant. Even so, it was enough to shock Shea. He almost jumped up. Dora? You actually know the goblin language? No. Dora sneered, not bothering to hide her ridicule of this country bumpkin's ignorance. No? You make it sound so easy. There is not a single living being that knows the real goblin language. However, I have told you before that the goblins were once the dominant race in this world. The real goblins were the most intelligent creatures. The language they created was a fusion of the elements of the languages of the other races in the world. Therefore, according to the guesses of later generations, the real goblin language actually included the words of modern humans, elves, dwarves, dragons, giants, and other races. After the fusion, it formed the most rigorous and complicated language. Pausing, Dora said in a low voice, Actually, the research of the ancient goblins has always existed. However, this research was forbidden by the secular world, especially among you humans. Humph. Kid, do you know? You humans are the best at erasing history. Because you are now the rulers of the world, you humans are always trying to erase the traces of the goblins. Humph. But no matter how you erase it, there will always be some traces left in the long river of history. For example, about 960 years ago, a human scholar once researched a goblin language. His lifetime of research resulted in him deciphering at least 300 characters in the goblin language. But do you know what happened to that fellow? Shea was puzzled. Dora's sneer was very vicious. He was thrown on the stake of your own human church and burned alive. Shea. Fortunately, we dragons and other races are not as hypocritical as you humans. As for the gnome civilization, the dragon race left behind some things, and I've seen a lot of them. But, Dora sighed. When you say understand, how can you really understand so much? I can only figure out a little bit by studying the remaining relics and the languages of several races. Shea was a little annoyed. Don't keep me in suspense. What exactly is written in this book? Dora sighed. I didn't guess wrong. This fellow is the leader of this army. And what's written in this book is probably the military diary it left behind. Maybe we don't believe in gods, but that doesn't mean we don't have faith. Quote from Our Glory and Our Fall, written by the goblin philosopher Chamak in the Third Era of the Glorious Era. Major General Kuriat, commander of the Eastern Garrison Corps of the Hardman Empire during the Fifth Era of the New Gods. This is our era and also the era of the New Gods. Is it us who created the New Gods, or the arrival of the New Gods who exterminated us? According to Dora's translation, the characters left on the first page of the book roughly meant this. This was obviously a diary written by a goblin officer called Kuriat. And it should be said that it was the commander of the Eastern Garrison Corps of the Hardman Empire during the Goblin Era. At the same time, this fellow was also a major general. According to the ancient books I know, the Goblin civilization, according to their calendar, their history is divided into 5 eras, each of which is about 5,000 years. And according to the ancient books that can be found now, the Goblin civilization only existed for 5 eras, which is a total of no more than 25,000 years of history. At the same time, I remember that I read in an ancient book of the elves that the last era of the Goblin civilization was called the Era of the New Gods. This era existed in the 5th era of the Goblins, and this Hardman Empire seems to be the last dynasty of the New Gods era, which is the last dynasty of the Goblins' domination of this world. Dora's voice was a bit solemn, and there was a bit of sincerity and fanaticism in it. The female dragon sighed, "It's too shocking. Even the elves who preserve the most complete ancient books have never preserved a complete book of the goblin era." Shea was also a bit curious, and he kept urging the female dragon. Then Dora finally translated this diary, bit by bit with difficulty. Although Dora's understanding of the ancient goblin language was not enough to translate the whole thing, just a few fragments were enough to make Shea feel a bit shocked about the ancient goblin civilization that existed in the ancient times. 5th Era, Year 429 of the New Gods Era, Starfire Day. My King Hardman Empire's 244th birthday. I, Kuriat, wish my king a happy birthday from the Eastern Sector. May the great King Hardman live forever. I also congratulate my King Hardman Empire for becoming the oldest goblin king in history, rising to 19th place in the rankings. Today I received a new mission. I will be leading my people to transport the 4th batch of XXXXX. Dora can't translate what this is, to the Creation God District. This is the second time in a year. I have always been afraid because the last time I entered the Creation God District, I had nightmares for a whole month when I came out. My good friend Emmett told me that people without faith have a void in their hearts, so their hearts are not strong enough. That's why they have nightmares. It's a manifestation of fear. I can't refute him because Emmett is an elf. He has a god that he believes in, but we goblins don't. So every time we talk about this topic, I can't refute him. Elves and other races all believe that there are gods in this world, although none of them can say what the gods they believe in look like. They don't even know where these gods are. According to their ancient legends, the gods existed in the sky. However, during the Third Era, the great goblin scholars had created spaceships that could survey every corner of the sky above our world. That search for the gods did not make any progress. I tried to convince my friend with this example, but Emmett refuted me with all the miracles recorded by the elves. I couldn't defend myself. This was because the most recent display of God's miracle was 50 years ago. I never understood why other races have gods, but we goblins don't. Maybe it's like Emmett said, our hearts are empty, and the gods have abandoned us. But my teacher, my father, my boss, and our great goblin scholar all told me when I was young that goblins don't need gods. But if we don't need gods, why start the Creation God Project? The 5th Era, the 429th year of the New God Era, there was a lack of moon and sun. After leaving the Creation God District, I once again felt the feeling that Emmett talked about. Yes, he said that this feeling is called fear. What does a god look like? This is a question that no race can answer accurately. But for us goblins, this question evolved into, what should a god look like? Yes, the intelligent and great goblins can create everything in this world, including gods. Since we don't have a god, we can create one. And whatever we want this god to look like, it will be created according to our ideas. Today, after leaving the Creation God District, I can't calm down. The things I saw always appear in my dreams. Gods should be powerful. This time, the elements we transported over are the most powerful element. I don't know if we can create a god that belongs to us goblins. Please forgive me, my confidence is wavering. Perhaps this is not a problem that an officer like me should be worried about. We have the greatest and most outstanding scholars, they can solve any problem. Today is the 22nd birthday of King Hardman's little princess, Lulu. I wish her a happy birthday. The 5th Era, the 429th year of the New God Era, there was a fire moon and sun. Today I saw Princess Lulu again. During the award ceremony, King Hardman personally put on the medal for me. At that time, Princess Lulu was sitting on the stage. Because of the death of a princess, Princess Lulu has become His Majesty's 44th wife. Even when His Majesty put on the medal for me, I can't forget the look in Princess Lulu's eyes. She is a goddess in the hearts of many officers. Yes, this is what Emmett told me. What does a goddess look like? If there really was a goddess, he hoped that she would look like Princess Lulu because she was too beautiful. I can finally stop having nightmares tonight because of Princess Lulu's smile. I will sleep well tonight. May the gods bless her, if we goblins have gods. The fifth era, the 431st year of the new god era. There was a fire moon and sun. Today, I rejected General Anlo's sister's invitation. She is very beautiful, but in my heart, I can't forget Princess Lulu's smile. Emmett said that he was willing to introduce me to an elf girl, but I rejected his kindness. I know that in this world, any dwarf, elf, or human girl would be proud to marry a goblin. Although I am not a racist, I still prefer a green-skinned goblin girl. It would be best if she was like Princess Lulu. I have a very small secret. I have always dreamed that one day, maybe I will have a chance to marry Princess Lulu. Because my king, the great Hardman, is already 246 years old. According to the laws of the goblins, after the king's family dies, the queen has the right to remarry. Oh, I am deeply ashamed of my thoughts. May His Majesty live a long life. I hope that under his wise leadership, the Hardman Empire will continue to prosper. The fifth era, the 431st year of the new god era, there was a fire moon and sun. Today, Emmett came to say goodbye to me. Because of the Creation God project, the relationship between us and the goblins became more and more tense. Emmett was recalled by the Elf King, and the parting with him was very painful. We have been good friends for 20 goblins. He is the smartest goblin I know, and he is also an excellent diplomat. Unfortunately, with his departure, I have lost a good friend. From now on, I will not have this guy by my side to teach me the interesting catchphrase, "May the gods protect me." Emmett told me that because of the Creation God project, the dwarves and dragons have already protested against His Majesty. They think that this act of creating gods is blasphemy against the true God. But the stubborn goblins will not stop our own plan. His Majesty has already given an official order. We will stick to this plan and complete it. We believe that in this world, there is nothing that the great goblins cannot create. Gods, no matter if these things exist or not. We will create a new one. When Emmett left, he was very sad. He said to me, "Perhaps the next time we meet, we will be enemies." Although I am very sad, I do not understand his words. I do not think that the weak elves can be the enemy of the great goblins. No matter if it is the elves, dwarves, humans, or even dragons, they are all too weak compared to the great goblins. I am sad for my friend's departure, but I do not agree with his words. The fifth era, the 431st year of the new god era, there was a day of mourning. Today is a day of sorrow for the world. My king, the great Hardman, has passed away. All the goblins are immersed in grief. His Majesty Hardman is already preparing for his next birthday. Unfortunately, he has not been able to create a new record. However, his 246 years of life is enough to rank him in the top 20 of all the goblin kings in history. All the goblins are optimistic that this record will not be broken in the short term. What makes me even sadder is that Princess Lulu has decided to protect her marriage contract for His Majesty. She will never marry again. I have to say, this decision makes me very sad. Today, I have finally made my decision. I will go to the Creation God District to serve. I hope to leave this place. Perhaps leaving will help me forget. The fifth era, the 432nd year of the new God era, there was a lack of moon and sun. Today is the last day of the first month in the Creation God District. Today, there is a piece of news that makes everyone uneasy. Our famous goblin scholar, Mr. Babaya, has publicly expressed his pessimism about the Creation God project. He said that he does not think that the project will succeed. Although Babaya's statement was quickly refuted by many other goblin scholars, for some reason, everyone cared about his words. When I was young, I heard a saying, "When you are angry about something, it means that you care about it." So, everyone is desperately refuting Babaya's words. Does everyone think that Babaya's words are actually? No, 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 I am a glorious goblin general. I must have strong confidence. We great goblins can create everything in this world. We can definitely do it. The fifth era, the 433rd year of the new god era, there was a day of mourning. Today is the first day of the new year. But today I heard a piece of news. The most recent experiment has ended in failure again. All 133 baby gods have been declared dead. All the goblins seemed very disappointed. I saw that there was no smile on the goblin's face. Today, I signed a transfer order for a batch of goblins to be transferred out of the Creation God District. The goblins who were transferred out seemed to be very happy. They seemed to be tired of this place. Yes. I really hope that there are more names on the transfer order list. That way, I can let more goblins leave this place happily. Yes, what was the word that Emmett said in the past? Yes, it was hell. The entire Creation God District is like hell. I heard that many of the guards near the first district have contracted serious diseases because of hearing those terrifying sounds all year round. I am very worried about this. The fifth era, the 433rd year of the new god era, there was a day of mourning. Today, another experiment failed. The experimental group requested that I immediately mobilize a new batch of XXXXX. In response to such a request, I can only submit a report. These scholars expressed their dissatisfaction. I understand their dissatisfaction, but there is nothing I can do. The Creation God project has been delayed for a total of 433 years. In 433 years, we have still not been able to create a god. In 433 years, we have sent away 4 great kings. Although the new kings have expressed their strong support for this project, it seems that after 433 years of hard work, the patience of the goblins has been exhausted. Today, another scholar withdrew from this project. At the same time, he also announced his despair and pessimism about this project. I know very well that he is not the only goblin with such thoughts. This time, there are much fewer voices that refute him. The fifth era, the 433rd year of the new god era, there was a day of mourning. Today, I am very happy because I made a new friend. I became friends with Scholar Sark of the experimental group. Sark is the smartest guy I have ever met. He reminds me of my good friend Yimit. No, Sark is smarter than Yimit because he is a goblin while Yimit is only an elf. Although Sark does not know how to say interesting things like, my god. He is very smart and very knowledgeable. He can use the calendar to calculate the birthdays of every goblin king. He can also recite the names of the 4,000 plants in the complete collection of Goblin Plant. But later, I found out that I was fooled by Sark. When I returned and flipped through the complete collection of Goblin Plants, I found the words author, Sark written on it. This guy, Sark allows me to enter his laboratory every evening when I rest. We can drink a cup or two of sweet honey and chat about our favorite poets and music. Actually, I hope that he can tell me how to pursue a woman because I heard that he once had 7 wives. The fifth era, the 434th year of the new god era, there was a day of mourning. The first day of the new year. Today, I received a piece of news that made the goblins very angry. The dwarves and giants, these 2 despicable races, actually declared war on us. These guys overestimate their own abilities. I believe that the powerful goblin army will soon flatten their tribes. After the news of the war came, every soldier and officer in the Creation God District was very angry. Today, I received at least 300 applications to be transferred to the war zone. Every goblin wanted to teach those guys a lesson. I did not approve these applications, but I praised each and every one of them. But when we drank honey together in the evening, Sark did not seem relaxed. Because I joked with him. I said that I would like to make a bet with him on how long it would take for our powerful goblin army to flatten the tribes of the dwarves and giants. I bet that it would take at most 2 months. But Sark's expression was very serious at that time. After drinking a cup of sweet honey, he patted my shoulder and said something to me. He said, "I am afraid that it will take a lot longer than you and I think." To be honest, I do not understand what he meant. The 5th era, the 434th year of the new God era, on the day of the fiery moon. Today I received a piece of news that shocked me. The elves have also declared war on us. Because I am in the Creation God district, this place is too far away from the outside world. The news that I received happened 10 days ago. I am very worried. I do not understand why the elves would declare war on us. In fact, among the many races, I have always thought that the elves are the smartest race. Of course, other than us goblins. Those smart elves, why would they choose to become enemies with us? I am more worried about my old friend Ymit. He is such a smart and friendly guy. I cannot imagine what it will be like when we become enemies. I am also worried that, in this war, Ymit will be hurt. After all, the goblin army is too powerful. The elves will soon be defeated. In the war, will he be hurt, will he die? I told Sark about my worries, but today, Sark was silent for a long time. He did not say anything. By the way, Sark has been acting very strange recently. He seems to be spending more and more time in his study, chatting with me and drinking sweet honey. In the past, he should be spending more time in District 1 experimenting. It was not until I left that Thacker said a word to me. "This guy is acting very strange today." He said to me, "If you can, apply for a transfer, my friend." I don't understand, but I know that Sark will not tell me why. He is just a goblin. Although he is smart, he is also very stubborn. This is 8,000 words. This is the amount I wrote in the morning. In addition, there will be an update tonight. I will try to write earlier, hehe. These 2 days I have to hurry up and catch up on my homework. By the way, please recommend me. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 209. GLR Chapter 196. So stupid. Dora used a strange tone as she slowly narrated the contents of the diary. In fact, most of the words were modified by Dora according to human speech habit. As for the original content, the words and expressions were said to be very different from human speech habit. Moreover, Dora didn't really understand a portion of it either. She could only guess and read it half-heartedly. Even so, the contents of the diary were enough to shock Shea. This was a complete, huge, goblin civilization. Occasionally, one could see how prosperous the goblin civilization was from the few words that were spoken. The era of the goblins. If the goblins of that era were like what Major General Kuriak wrote in this diary, then their civilization, I think, I should have seen the key point. Shea stroked his chin. How did the goblin civilization perish? Do you know, Dora? When Shea said those words, his mind was filled with the contents of the diary. 246 years old His Majesty, the Goblin King, 22 years old Princess. After the king died, the princess could remarry. The goblins that could create everything, the powerful goblins, the great goblins in that era, all the girls of other races were proud to marry a goblin. Oh my God! What kind of world is this? I feel like I am reading a tragedy, Shea said. I feel like I am narrating a tragedy to you, Dora said. Both of their voices were a little strange. 5th era, New God era, year 4334, the 9th day of the lack of a moon. Today, the news of the failure of the Southern Front came, causing the entire Creation God district to fall into shock. I am anxiously waiting for the latest war report from the army. I think, perhaps tomorrow, the news of us being transferred to the battlefield will come. I couldn't understand why the powerful goblin army would lose to the weak dwarves and giants. The Eastern Front battlefield was the closest to the Creation God area, and the elven army was blocked by the tenacious goblin army on the east side of XXX Mountain. However, more and more goblins are expressing their dissatisfaction. Our army is too incompetent. Today, when Sack was chatting with me, he suddenly asked me a strange question. For the past 2 days, Sack's mood had been a bit strange. This guy seemed to have become abnormally excited recently. He was full of energy and spent all day and night in the laboratory. The chances for me to see him were getting fewer and fewer. Today was such a rare opportunity, but he asked me a question that I couldn't answer. Perhaps when Sack asked this question, he didn't expect to get an answer from an officer like me. Perhaps he just needed someone to talk to. He said, "Curiate, what do you think the gods should be like?" How would I know the answer to that? The 5th era, year 4334 of the New Gods era, the 12th day of the missing moon. The human race had declared war. The news aroused our greatest indignation. The human race had always been our goblins' staunchest ally. In a sense, the human race was recognized by the goblins as a race that could barely be considered as our friend. We believed that the human race was the second most powerful race besides the goblins. In the last war against the underworld, these creatures who looked very similar to the underworld obtained the greatest benefit. They became our allies. For hundreds of years, the goblins taught them more technology, taught them more culture, and taught them more civilization. But now the human race betrayed us. Even the most optimistic goblins began to worry about the situation. We are facing a forefront war, and I heard that the dragons in the north are also ready to make a move. Today, the only comforting news was that the goblins' most powerful army, the Divine Fire Legion, had already set off to the south. They will teach those traitors a lesson. As the goblins' most powerful legion, the Divine Fire Legion has many good friends of mine. I received 2 letters from my friends, telling me that they will use this opportunity to make contributions. They are very confident. Me too. The 5th era, year 4334 of the New Gods era, the day of the red moon. Sark is sick. He was diagnosed with a serious respiratory disease, but he refused the proposal to be transferred out of the creation god area. Recently, his health has not been very good, and it has been difficult for us to find an opportunity to meet and chat. But today, Sark came to find me again. I was surprised because he had never taken the initiative to come to my office. Today, Sark's appearance frightened me. He looked like he had not shaved or bathed for many days. He sat opposite me and said some strange and incomprehensible words to me. He told me, "Curiate, do you know why the creation god plan has not been successful? Because we are all wrong. What are the gods like? This is a question that none of us can answer. But the biggest mistake of us goblins is that we were misled by the words of other races in the process of creating the god. No matter if it was the humans, the elves, the dwarves, or the giants, all races, no matter what the gods they believe in, have one thing in common. They all believe that the gods are omnipotent and perfect. Yes, it was flawless. This is a damned misdirection. There was no perfect existence in this world, not even a god could be perfect. And our mistake all along was that we imagined the god we were about to create as a perfect thing. We did not allow it to have the slightest flaw, which caused our plan to fail again and again. Sark asked me, "If you want to, what do you think the gods are like?" For this question, I was silent for a long time before I gave my answer. My answer is simple: powerful. We need a powerful god with great power. The benefits are very obvious, at least it can help us win this war. Sark asked me, "How powerful do you need?" I thought for a long time, and I said to him, "More powerful than the maximum energy level of the magic cannon." Sark smiled and said to me, "It seems that you understand." The 5th era, year 4335 of the New Gods era, the day of the New Gods. The first day of the new year. Today, the news of victory came, and all the goblins were very excited. The powerful Divine Fire Legion in the south taught a lesson to the humans who betrayed us. This is the first news to make everyone excited since the war. Today, the Creation God District provided wine, and everyone was celebrating. Sark drank a lot, and he has become more and more strange recently. His body is getting weaker and weaker day by day, which makes me very worried. But his spirit is getting better and better, which makes me feel strange. Today, he asked me, should the gods have emotions? I don't understand. In fact, I am a little tired of talking about the gods all day long. I am tired of talking about this topic all day long. But, in a place like the Creation God District, everyone's common goal is to create that damn thing. Apart from that, it seems that we don't have anything else to talk about. My answer is, I don't know. Today, Sark asked me a second question. What do you think the relationship between those races, their gods, and those races should be like? Do they need the gods, or do the gods need them? This is a very interesting question. What is the relationship between the gods and their people? Who needs who? I told Sark that I think it is the people who need the gods. But Sark asked me, if there are no people, then what is the meaning of the gods' existence? I am speechless. 5th Era, New God Era, 4335 year, Fire Moon Day. Today, after the confidential information came, I fell into a huge shock. The Divine Fire Legion has suffered such heavy losses. In the previous war report, although the Divine Fire Legion defeated the humans who betrayed us in the south, the Divine Fire Legion also suffered heavy losses. 2 of my good friends died in the south. The Divine Fire Legion has been ordered to retreat and reorganize, and more than 10,000 goblin soldiers died in the south. I received orders to reorganize the army, because in order to deal with the future war, my army may be transferred out of the Creation God District at any time and rush to the battlefield. I heard that the Divine Fire Legion's losses reached 60%. Such a tragic situation, I can't believe it is true. Those humans, do they really have such powerful strength? 5th Era, New God Era, 4335 year, Earth Moon Day. I have never imagined this kind of idea or saying. In this world, among all the races, only we goblins are free. We don't have a god. This is not a flaw, but a kind of superiority. The other races, the noble elves, the lowly dwarves, the proud dragons, they all have a god, but this is not something to be proud of, because they have to submit to the so-called god, believe in it, praise it, obey it. This is like a shackle on their neck. The stupidest thing we goblins did was to listen to those guys and think that not having a god is a flaw. We clearly don't have a shackle on our necks, but we were encouraged by those who have a shackle and decided to create a shackle for ourselves. Is there anything more ridiculous than this in the world? These words are the latest words of great scholar Babaya. Although Babaya was soon arrested for the crime of bewitching the goblins, after seeing these words today, I suddenly feel more and more shaken. I ran to ask Sak. Sak was busy at that time and was very impatient with my visit, but after hearing my question, Sak suddenly calmed down. Then he told me something that shocked me even more. He told me that the Creation God plan is about to succeed. We are about to have a god that belongs to us goblins. Well, I had a kind of relieved thought. No matter what this god is, praise it, ask it to bless us goblins and win this war. 5th Era, New God Era, 4335 year, Starfire Day. The order for my troops has been given. We don't need to be transferred out of the Creation God area because the situation has become more severe. The army on the Eastern Front has suffered a disastrous defeat. When they were facing the attack of the elves, the elven god showed a miracle. In that miracle, tens of thousands of goblin soldiers were killed. The Eastern Front has been routed. According to the information from the military, the elves may have crossed over XXX Mountain and may directly threaten the existence of the Creation God area. My army must strictly guard this place. The elven army has come. Could it be that he is also in this army? If I meet him, I won't be merciful. 5th Era, New God Era, 4335 year, Red Moon Day. Sack finally couldn't take it anymore. The doctor told me that he didn't have much time left, but Sack still refused to rest. He had become very crazy recently, and even I found it difficult to get close to him. But today, when I went to visit him, he finally met me. Sack looked very tired, and his eyes were very weak. He told me that the creation God plan was perhaps the most serious mistake that the great goblins had ever made. I asked him, if it was a mistake, why continue? He said, we have already done half of it. If we give up now, it won't just be a mistake, it will be stupid. So, no matter what, this opportunity must be completed. Before leaving, Sack gave me a book. It was Our Glory and Our Fall, written by the greatest goblin philosopher of the glorious era, Chamak. Sack said that there was a sentence in the book, maybe we don't believe in gods, but that doesn't mean we don't have faith. It was only recently that he truly understood this sentence. Unfortunately, Chamak had already understood this principle in the Third Era, but it was only today that he truly understood it. He secretly told me, the new god is almost complete. Unlike the perfect gods of other races, this god that belongs to us goblins is powerful, but at the same time, it is ugly and evil. I don't care if this thing is ugly or evil, but it is powerful, and this makes me happy. We need it to be powerful. After returning, I wrote this sentence, maybe we don't believe in gods, but that doesn't mean we don't have faith. On the first page of this diary. But at night, I suddenly received news that Sack had died. Sack's students told me that before he died, Sack kept muttering a sentence. He said, so stupid, we are so free, but we envy those races that are shackled, so stupid. Sack was such a smart goblin. Perhaps he was right. We are so stupid. Please recommend me. I vomit blood, please recommend me. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 210. GOR Chapter 197. Enemy, there is clearly no shackle around my neck, yet I decided to create one for myself. Shea repeated the two sentences that Dora read out to him. After a while, the country bumpkin laughed out. In the beginning, his laughter was very soft and the corners of his mouth were slightly curled up. Then, his laughter grew louder and louder until he was rocking back and forth. His laughter was loud and unrestrained. However, Dora could tell that there was no trace of a smile within the country bumpkin's laughter. This kind of laughter was more like a kind of pity, a kind of sorrow, or a kind of mockery. After enduring the country bumpkin's laughter for a long time, Dora asked coldly, what are you laughing at? These ancient gnomes are very cute, but also very pitiful. Shea seemed to wipe the corners of his eyes. He was clearly smiling, but his eyes were so sharp. There are no shackles, but you created shackles for yourself. Is there anything more King ridiculous than this? Dora was silent for a moment before slowly speaking up. I nearly forgot, you are also a fellow without faith. You are wrong. Contrary to Dora's expectations, the country bumpkin's retort was very straightforward and firm. Perhaps we do not believe in God, but that does not mean we do not have faith, Shea suddenly said. Then, a trace of cunning appeared in his eyes. Using the words of the greatest known philosopher of the glorious era, Chamaka's book, Our Glory and Our Fall. Dora, don't you think that these gnomes are very smart? Much smarter than you. The country bumpkin's tone was very cold. I was born in Wildfire Plains. I am not a Byzantium citizen, not a Lantis citizen, not a Odin citizen. Thus, I did not join any religion. I grew up in the mountains and do not believe in any god. What I believe in is strength, the law of the jungle, the survival of the fittest. What I believe in is the axe in my hand. Because I know that I need it to chop down firewood and chop down the heads of wild beasts. You are just a hunter, Dora retorted. Yes, a hunter. At this moment, the vulgar country bumpkin's tone was like that of a wise philosopher. What about you? The noble and proud dragon race, the powerful Dora. You are a dragon. When you were alive, your lifespan was perhaps dozens of times longer than mine. You were hundreds of times stronger than me. But are you really stronger than me? Just as Dora was about to retort, Shea added, Yes, it seems so. But, don't forget, even when you die without freedom. It was this last sentence that seemed to have crushed Dora's confidence in refuting. That's right. You said something like dragons must have their souls buried, so the dragon's soul must rest in the dragon's graveyard to obtain eternal peace and rest. Ha 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 ha. Shea laughed wildly. Do you know what I was thinking the first time I heard you say that? What I'm thinking is that your dragon god is really King crazy. Take off your pants and fart. If you die, then you die. Close your eyes, kick your legs and end it all. But you? Even when you die without freedom. Even after you die, you still have to follow the rules set by it. Ha 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 ha. Dora, do you know what this is? Is what? Dora subconsciously asked. Shackles. Dora was stunned. Or rather, a creature as wise as her suddenly could not find any words to refute this vulgar and rude country bumpkin. It was as if she was choked. After a while Dora retorted, But if I don't do that, my soul will not be able to rest in peace. Yes. Shea said with disdain. Your soul will not be able to rest in peace. So, you must let your soul return to the tomb. If you cannot return, your soul will disappear into thin air. After saying that, Shea suddenly took a deep breath. Then, he asked Dora in a very serious manner. Let me ask you, how can you be sure that even if you return to the dragon race's sacred tomb, your soul will not disappear into thin air? Would he definitely be able to obtain eternal rest? How can you be sure? This is set by the dragon god. Before Dora could finish, Shea shook his head. No, that is not what I am asking you. I am asking you, how can you be sure? Sure. Could it be that other dead dragons have told you, using their own experiences to tell you, that after they die, their souls will enter the tomb and they will be able to rest in peace? Nonsense. After they die, their souls will enter the tomb. How can they tell me that? That is it, Shea sneered maliciously. Not a single dragon can prove what happens after they die. And the things you believe now were all taught to you by that dragon god. Country bumpkin harumph. Maybe your dragon god is lying to you. Maybe your dragon god is just spouting nonsense. Ha ha. Maybe even if your souls return to the tomb, the energy of your consciousness will be exhausted and they will disappear into thin air. Heaven knows. At any rate, after your soul dies, it will be impossible for you to come back and tell us the truth. Do you understand? Shut up. Shut up. Dora was truly enraged. She roared furiously inside Shea's head, causing Shea's eyes to darken. He pressed down hard on his temples. The she-dragon's roar continued for a long time before it gradually subsided. Shea let go of his hand and coldly said, If you want to convince me, it is very simple. Take out evidence to refute me, and not just talk about what God said. Although Dora was extremely angry, she could not find any words to refute Shea. In her anger, she tried her best to find a reason to refute this B****starred who was spouting nonsense. However, after thinking for a long time, she realized that she could not find any evidence to shut this B****starred up. Everything was indeed what God said. Now, if you don't want to continue arguing with me, then translate the contents of this book for me to hear. In your dreams. Dora said hatefully. You dare to use such vile words to question my faith, and you still want me to help you, ha? Shea deliberately laughed. The things in this book were written by an ancient gnome. It was left behind by those gnomes who did not believe in God. Do you have a guilty conscience, Dora? Are you worried that the contents of this book will further prove that my statement is correct? Bah! Dora was indeed provoked. She said angrily, "Okay. I will translate it for you. The fifth era of the new God era, 4,335 years, the lack of the moon and the sun. Sark's funeral was very simple. We buried him in the woods of the Creation God district. Everyone thought that this was a good idea because Sark said that he liked this forest when he was alive. Today, I received an order that the respected Marshal of the Empire, Marshal AZ, would come to the Creation God district for inspection. In such a tense time, the Marshal's inspection became the most important thing in the Creation God district. Soldiers and officers wrote a lot of letters of war, hoping that they would be transferred to the front line to fight for the Empire. This time, I did not stop such a move. Instead, I personally put away these letters of war and added a letter on top, mine. Sark's death made me suddenly have a deep hatred for this place. I would rather go to war, and I would rather die in battle. The fifth era of the new God era, 4,335 years, the lack of the moon and the sun. The arrival of Marshal AZ and his party was much earlier than expected. It was not the first time I saw the Marshal. A few years ago, before I came to the Creation God district, the Marshal had personally appointed me. A few years later, when I saw the Marshal again, he looked very tired and old. Marshal AZ did not review the soldiers and officers as usual. Instead, he listened to the progress of the experimental group first. Because this process was the top secret of the Empire, I was not qualified to attend. But I noticed that when Marshal AZ walked out of the conference room, his expression was very ugly. In my impression, Marshal Azrael was a strong goblin warrior. He once wrote, "Shout Oak Onward Goblins." Such an inspiring book. But now, even I could see the weakness in his eyes. When I sent a lot of letters of war, Marshal AZ didn't even look at them and threw them all into the trash can. I was surprised by such a practice because it was an insult to the quality of a goblin. But when I was trying to argue, the Marshal and I had a conversation alone. And this conversation was the biggest reason why I wrote this diary. I was shocked. Marshal AZ told me that in fact, the situation on the front line was much worse than we knew. But in order to stabilize the people, the announced results had been edited. This practice was to avoid some unnecessary chaos. And the truth I heard from the Marshal was that the Divine Fire Legion had been basically destroyed, and now the human and dwarf coalition forces in the south were going north. In the north, the dragons had completely annihilated 3 goblin regiments. It was annihilation, not defeat. The dragon god also showed a miracle. It was a huge disaster. A regiment of goblins fell into eternal sleep in that disaster. And what worried Marshal AZ even more was that the humans had divided a part of their strength, trying to directly penetrate from the south to the east, and the dragons in the north, making a pincer attack on the Empire's hinterland. Only the East District was still stubbornly resisting, but the situation was bad because the humans' Dieter army had cut off the connection between the rear of the East District and the Empire's hinterland. In other words, the East District, including the Creation God area, was now surrounded by these hostile races. The Marshal told me that at least for a long time in the future, the Creation God area would not receive any supplies from the Empire's hinterland, and the elements needed for new experiments could not be transported out. As for those letters of war, my child, you don't have to apply for transfer here, because, if you want to fight, believe me, those enemies will soon appear here. Appear in front of your eyes. I couldn't believe such a bad situation. Our powerful goblins, the great goblins, the best race in the world, how could we fall to such a point? Is it because we don't have the blessing of the gods? The Marshal's answer to my question was, the real reason is because we don't have a god, but we want to create a god. From now on, the Creation God plan is no longer a national plan, it has become a military plan. Those despicable races can gain an advantage over us on the battlefield because they have the help of those gods. The miracles shown by those gods are powerful enough to kill many goblins. So, in order to compete with them, we must have our own god, we must have a powerful weapon that can compete with them. Marshal Az told me that he would return to the capital immediately. He would be responsible for mobilizing all the troops to resist the threat of the invaders to the capital. It would be a cruel battle to defend the capital. And he gave me a very difficult task. Guard the Creation God area, my child. Because in a sense, this place is more important than our capital. Even if we lose our capital, as long as you succeed here, our great goblins have the hope of turning the tables. More than 400 years of hard work, invested all the national power in the plan, and consumed too much power of the goblins, which allowed those bastards to take advantage of the situation. We will not surrender, and the goblins will not admit defeat. In this world, there are only dead goblins, there are no defeated goblins. I can't give you any support, I can't give you any supplies, but I need you and your army to guard this place. No matter what, this place can't be captured by the enemy. These are the original words that the marshal told me. When I wrote these words, my pen was trembling. I don't know if I can complete this task. It may even be the most difficult task in my life, and maybe the last one. This is no longer an ordinary war. This is a multiple-choice question: survive or perish. 5th Era, New God Era, Year 4335, Earth Moon Day. Because of the Marshal's appointment, I became the highest military commander of the Creation God area and was also appointed as a member of the experimental team. I obtained the highest authority in this area, and my responsibility was to use my life to maintain the continuation of this plan. I obtained the highest authority and could access all the information about the Creation God project. I spent 2 days and 2 nights reading these materials, and what I read was only the most recent 100 years. But just this part made me feel a huge shock. What did we do? I felt my whole body trembling. It was a trembling of fear, a trembling of regret and anger. In just these 100 years, the goblins had almost exhausted all the national power that could be mobilized for this project. A large number of other research was suspended or indefinitely shelved, and all the best goblin scholars and experts were mobilized to carry out this huge project. For this, we stopped the research on the newest warship, stopped the research on the new energy-level magic cannons, stopped the research on the improvement of the goblin race, and stopped the research on new energy sources to replace magic power. We paid such a huge price, and our goblin civilization entered a state of stagnation for 100 years, and our technology remained stagnant for 100 years. All of this was for the creation of a damned god. Yes, damned god. Zach was right, we were really stupid. Ever since I was young, my father told me that if you do something stupid, you will be punished. 5th Era, 4335 Year of the New God Era, the last missing moon day. I haven't written a diary for a long time. Recently, we have been unable to maintain stable contact with the outside world, and we haven't received any news from the capital for more than 6 months. The most recent news was that the dragons had passed through the northern plains, and the humans had joined forces with the dragons to surround the capital. We don't have any more goblin troops, and almost all the reserves have been mobilized. Marshal Azrael was right, this is no longer a war, but a choice. Survive or go extinct. Ever since I became the commander of the Creation God area, the more I learned about this plan, the deeper the reverence in my heart. I couldn't sleep soundly almost every night, and the shocking contents of the plan gave me nightmares every night. I even suspected that more than 400 years ago, when His Majesty the Goblin King signed this plan, what kind of mood did he have when he made this decision? Using the fate of the goblin race for the next few hundred years to gamble on an illusory dream that might not even exist. But I also understood that this might be the biggest flaw of us goblins: the pursuit of perfection. We are already the most powerful race in the world, and our only flaw is that we don't have a god that belongs to us. We don't have the things that other races weaker than us have. We conquered the continent, conquered the sky, conquered everything, but we didn't conquer our own hearts. This is a gamble. For me, the biggest tragedy is that I can't change this reality. Because, if this is a tragedy, then this tragedy has already begun 400 years ago. And now, it has already entered the curtain call stage. At present, the food is still abundant. The 6 connected underground warehouses in the Creation God area store enough food for the 46,000 goblins in our district to eat for a year. But the unstable morale of the army has reached the point where it is difficult to control. Today, 3 more deserters appeared, and one of them was actually a low-level officer. This made me very shocked. But they are not cowards, they just can't bear to worry about their families. Their families are all in the capital, all outside. I still ordered the deserters to be executed, and before that officer died, I asked him if he had any last words. He said to me, "General, I am not afraid of death, nor am I afraid of fighting, but I am afraid of waiting, so I would rather escape. Perhaps our hometown has fallen, but I am more willing to go back there and die with my family than live here and wait in despair." His words made me silent. In the end, I personally executed his death sentence. But I can't forget his eyes before he died. It wasn't fear, but unwillingness and regret. What troubled him wasn't death, but that he couldn't see his family, or die with his family. At this moment, I also remembered the days in the capital, remembered the eyes that I had deliberately suppressed and forgotten, and that smile. "Princess Lulu, are you safe?" 5th era, New God era, 4336th year, New Sunday. Today, we have finally waited for news from the outside. A remnant of the Goblin Army has entered the Creation God District. Their designation is the Central Defense District's Red Sun Army. The Red Sun Army should be stationed in the southeast of the capital. I once had 2 friends who served in this army, but seeing them today made me very surprised. It is the designation of an army, but the number of goblins that came is less than 800. I can't imagine what kind of harsh test this army has gone through. What made the goblins here even more desperate was that the arrival of the Red Sun Army brought a lot of bad news. The great capital of the goblins had fallen 2 goblin months ago. The hateful dragon race and the human race, after the last war with the demon race, once again joined forces. Their dragon knight is indeed incomparably powerful. The frontal assault of these dragon knights has defeated our army, and the damned dwarves, they are good at digging holes, they dug a tunnel and attacked our defense line. Our capital has fallen. His Majesty Hardman Jr. has committed suicide for the country. The brothers of the Red Sun Army told me that they received the order of Marshal Azrael after their defeat. Marshal Azrael's last order was to let all the Goblin Army break through the siege and try to move closer to the eastern region. The Red Sun Army received the order to enter the Creation God District. Unfortunately, when they came here, there were only a few goblins left. And the Honorable Marshal Azrael, he fulfilled his promise. After the capital was captured, he led the guards and died gloriously in the street battle. I can imagine the scene of this old goblin, who was 3 times my age, waving his weapon and shouting slogans as he died in battle. But in fact, a brother of the Red Sun Army told me that he witnessed the scene of the marshal's death. He was cruelly trampled to death by a dragon knight's mount. What made all the goblins in the Creation God District angry was the other news brought by the Red Sun Army. In this war, those races obviously didn't just want to defeat us. According to them, outside, in the northern plains, in the capital, in other areas, in all the fallen areas, those races, they are wantonly slaughtering our goblin compatriots. Not only were the goblin soldiers killed, but also innocent civilians. They destroyed our buildings, burned our libraries and schools, and turned everything into ruins. These bastards, they want to exterminate our race. Exterminate. This word is not unfamiliar, because in history, in the last war against the demon race, we did this. I fell into a great worry. The fall of the capital, is Lulu still alive? If those damn races are really carrying out a massacre to exterminate us, then can Lulu escape this disaster? I heard from the brothers of the Red Sun Army that before the capital was surrounded, there was a group of refugees who escaped from the capital and went to the east. I heard that some members of the royal family were among them. I really hope that Lulu is among those who escape. They don't want to occupy our city at all, because every time they go to a place, the first thing they do is to massacre, and the second thing is to tear down all the buildings in sight. The third thing is to set fire, burn all the traces in sight. It's like we never existed. The fifth era, the 4336th year of the new God era, the first day without a moon. Today, there are finally enemies approaching the creation God district. A small team of elves approached the outer forest, and after a short confrontation, they quickly left. I know very well that what is about to come is the most brutal battle. We have no reinforcements, no supplies, and no retreat. The home we live in no longer exists, the land we own no longer belongs to us, the loved ones we love have died, and the country we are loyal to has perished. And we, this race, are also in the process of being exterminated. At this time, perhaps there is no way to stop all of this from happening. The fifth era, the 4336th year of the new God era, the day of the red moon. The enemies have finally arrived, and an allied army formed by elves and humans appeared outside the security perimeter. Today, I sent away an old friend of mine. When I saw Ymit again, I almost couldn't recognize him. In my memory, Ymit had a gentle smile and warm eyes, but when I saw him today, his stiff eyes made me feel unfamiliar. I saw the killing and cruelty in his eyes. As a goblin, he was still so proud. He came to our security perimeter alone and asked to see me. He knew that I was the highest officer here. On behalf of the Allied Army, he put forward the condition that all the goblins in the Creation God District must immediately and unconditionally surrender. I asked him, "What happens after we surrender? Will we be slaughtered by you all as well?" He told me that the massacre outside was done by other races, and that the noble goblins didn't do such a thing. I said to him, "Witnessing a crime with your own eyes and not stopping it is not qualified to call yourself noble." And the funny thing was, he was the one who told me these words back then. Ymit told me that he could guarantee my safety after my people surrendered. Moreover, he told me that this was because the things in the Creation God District were very important to them. As long as I promised to leave them a complete Creation God District, in exchange, they could get a dignified surrender and obtain the right to live. Similarly, I didn't hesitate to reject him. When Ymit left, he said to me, "You will regret this, my friend." My answer was, F*CKU enemy. I don't know what everyone will say. Maybe some people will say that these few chapters of Goblin history aren't exciting enough. But to be honest, I feel very good about writing them. Yesterday's sentence, so stupid, was written after an hour of deliberation. Of course, writing the history of the goblins, fabricating the history of a race that doesn't exist, a great race. Maybe this is too personal. Maybe, if I write that a country bumpkin kills a monster to get a piece of equipment, then kills a monster to get a level, then kills a boss to get a command. Maybe this will be more exciting, but those who know me know that this is never my way of writing. I like these few chapters about the goblins very much. I really like it, I won't lie to you. The bad news is, the boss of the Taiwanese publishing house I'm working with today is in Nanjing, so I have to go and entertain him, so I can't update tonight. Today, I only updated one big chapter, 7,000 words, which is far from enough to make up for my homework. Well, if I can go home earlier tonight, I will continue to stay up late. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 211. Last night I was drunk. Today I had a bad day, vomiting and diarrhea. I found that my body is really bad now, and my alcohol tolerance is also a lot worse. I just got up this night to write, so I wrote until now. Chapter 198, just walking in the front, the 5th era, the 436th year of the new God era, Earth Moon Day. The attack has been going on for a few days. Although their attacks have been repelled many times, I know very well that the situation is not optimistic. If this trend continues, then the fall of the creation God area is only a matter of time. But the problem is, everyone doesn't think so. The army stationed in the creation God area has always been the strongest goblin army, and we have the best equipment. After repelling the enemy's several attacks, I found that many goblins have begun to be blindly optimistic, thinking that these enemies don't seem to be great. Some people have even begun to suggest a counterattack. I can't imagine. Although the enemy has not shown their strength, I am sure that the most difficult time is far from coming. I have found some subtle differences. It must be that the elven archers have strengthened their range a lot compared to before, and to deal with our magic cannons, they have invented a defensive magic. The dwarves have begun to build fortifications outside, which is also a factor that makes me uneasy. My military knowledge had reminded me more than once that it wasn't a good idea to continue defending this place. If I followed the correct course of action, I should have immediately led my army to break out of the encirclement and enter the huge mountainous area. Then, I would have used our superior equipment and familiarity with the terrain to engage them in guerrilla warfare. This way we would have been able to kill as many enemies as possible while reducing our disadvantage in numbers. But I can't make such a decision, because, for the fate of the goblins, I must defend here. Defend the creation God area. The 5th era, the 436th year of the new God era, 2nd missing moon day. The situation has become difficult. The arrival of a small group of dragons quickly made us feel the pressure. With the help of the dragons, they have a strong frontal breakthrough ability. Our outer defensive strongholds have been breached by them one by one. As a commander, I can't rescue the goblins who are defending the strongholds. I don't have many troops. In the entire creation God area, there are only 20,000 combat goblins, and the rest are civilian research goblins. Moreover, the most difficult thing is that every time we lose a soldier, our strength will weaken a little, and we won't be able to replenish our fighting strength. I watched as those strongholds were destroyed one by one. I tried to organize 2 counterattacks, but Emmett knew me far too well. The elf mages and archers were able to block us. When the outer outposts were cleared out, all the goblins defending the outposts were killed. Not a single goblin was captured or escaped. I could only concentrate on defending the main gate and a few key areas. The only news that makes me feel relaxed is that we don't lack military supplies. There are a lot of reserves in several large experimental warehouses in the Creation God area, and some logistics goblins have become production personnel. We have some machinery in reserve that can make weapons on the spot. 5th era, year 436 of the new God era, Fire Moon Day. The strength of 3 dragon knights almost broke through our frontal defense. I have never seen the might of the Dragon Knight with my own eyes. This legendary troop only existed in the previous war with the demon race, and that was a long time ago. I lost almost an entire team of elite goblin warriors in order to kill a single dragon knight. For this, I also lost 6 magic cannons. This time, the losses were heavy, but I believe that the enemy must be even more distressed. After all, the Dragon Knight is such a precious and powerful combat force, so the enemy must be distressed. The human race and the dragon race had a quarrel because of this, especially the dragon race. Their population was small to begin with, so losing a powerful giant was a huge blow to them. However, I still couldn't raise my spirit, because according to the situation, I started to suspect that the entire goblin kingdom has fallen. In other words, our entire world has been conquered by the enemy. The remaining goblins here in the creation god area are probably the last resistance of our race. Emmett, that cunning bastard, sent a team of elite elves to ambush us at night, but he neglected one point. He understands me, and I understand him. Tonight, I killed 6 elves with my own hand. One of them, the leader of the ambushers, was Emmett's follower when he was a diplomat in the capital. I remember that this fellow was good at brewing tea, and we used to talk about music together. But tonight, I personally pierced his throat. 5th Era, Year 436 of the New God Era, Year 3 of the New God Era. After a month of continuous fighting, the number of goblins who can fight is decreasing. I have already begun to mobilize the reserve personnel to fight. These goblins who were once porters, logisticians, storekeepers, cooks. These goblins have donned battle armor, picked up magic fire, and walked to the defensive line. They killed the enemy one by one and then fell one by one. We have done our best. In this month, we have killed 3 times the number of enemies, but they have an endless supply of reinforcements. I have already made plans. Once the outer defensive line fails, we will have no choice but to give up the main base and retreat into the cave. As long as we guard the entrance of the cave, I am confident that we can hold on for a few more months. 5th Era, Year 436 of the New God Era, Year 3 of the New God Era. Today, when the enemy pushed out the magic cannons, I was in complete despair. I believe that the other goblins who stood beside me at that time felt the same. How ironic! Those magic cannons were our weapons. Judging from the appearance of those magic cannons, they were high-energy longsong cannons. I quickly recognized them from their appearance. They were originally defensive weapons installed on the city walls of the capital. But now, these goblins directly moved them down and transported them here. The goblins' weapons were now aimed at the goblins. Using magic cannons was a job that required precise techniques, but that fellow Emmett. He had learned this technique during his years as a diplomat in the capital. When the elves skillfully controlled the magic cannons and fired at us, I understood that the situation was far worse than I had imagined. Our cannoneers were able to destroy the enemy's magic cannons in a 1-to-1 exchange. But the problem was that our magic cannons were almost completely destroyed. The resources stored in the warehouses and the factories in the district weren't able to meet the demand of producing a large number of magic cannons. Moreover, producing magic cannons required a large amount of time. Although we managed to stop the enemy's attack today, but I believe that if the outside world has been completely taken over by these enemies, they can definitely find more of the weapons we stored in the warehouses and move them over one by one. Then, they can point their cannons at us. My guards have been assigned to the battle order. 3 of my adjutants have died in battle. As for me, today I made a decision that left me helpless. I gave the order to immediately burn and destroy all the resources in the fortress that can't be moved. As for those that can be moved, move them all to the 1st district under the cave. 5th Era, Year 436 of the New God Era. Today is the first day of retreating to the 1st district. In order for everyone to safely retreat to the 1st district, I had no choice but to make a decision that left me heartbroken. I ordered my adjutant, Longnew, to lead a group of goblins on the fortress walls to make a final stand and stall for time. I will lead all the goblins and resources to retreat to the 1st district. When I told this order to Longnew, I couldn't even look him in the eye. Because we all know that staying behind to cover the retreat is tantamount to death. He is a kind and brave goblin, a young man in the southern part of the capital. He likes to laugh loudly, eat sweets, and collect all the different versions of gold coins issued since the founding of the empire. I remember that I once said to him, "Long Nu, do a good job. When you retire, I will give you a set of commemorative gold coins issued by the Empire's 400th anniversary celebration with the king's signature." Today, this goblin who likes to collect, when he said goodbye to me, he hugged me and said to me, "Kuriat, remember, you still owe me a set of commemorative gold coins." I didn't want him to cover the retreat. In fact, I even thought of completing this task myself. However, I am the Supreme Commander. There is more work for me to do. At that time, I shed tears and said to him, "My dear comrade, you are just walking in front of me." After retreating to the first district, I ordered the gate to be closed. 6 defensive gates fell. I believe that these alloy gates, each of which is 6 inches thick, will be enough to delay the enemy for a while. I also know that once we enter here, there will be no chance for us to leave. I muttered to myself as I watched the sluice gate fall. Yes, Long Nu, you are just walking in front of me, that is all. 5th era, New God era, 430, forget it. I know very well that our empire has already perished. Therefore, in the future, I will not record the date in the empire's era. Today is the 4th day after entering the caves in the first district. After retreating, every goblin showed different degrees of negative emotions. Everyone knows very well that there is not much hope for us to go out and see the sun again. The caves in the first district are large enough to accommodate the remaining goblins. After some temporary repairs, I have placed my last hope on the research center. The latest progress of the experimental research team is still telling me that the cultivation of the new god is almost complete. However, I've already heard the words "almost complete" too many times. Every time I ask, they answer me in the same way. Today, for the first time, I got angry at the experimental research team. However, after that anger, I regretted it, because I know very well that the experts in each experimental team have worked very hard. Because of the lack of rest, each goblin in the experimental team has different degrees of health problems. Almost complete. I doubt if I will be able to wait until the day it is completed. The 9th day after entering the first district. Starting today, we have heard explosions coming from above the cave. It is obvious that the enemies outside have begun to destroy the defensive gates. I am not sure how long the defensive gates can withstand the enemy. Fortunately, we destroyed all of the enemy's magic cannons last time. It will take a lot of time for them to transfer new magic cannons into the mountains. Apart from the explosions, the goblin in charge of monitoring the situation told me that he heard suspicious sounds coming from the mountains. I understand that the dwarves are making a move. They are trying to break through the mountain walls and tunnel down from the outside. However, I wasn't worried at all. That was because after several hundred years of operation, the caves in the first district had already become a complete structure. The walls of the entire first district were made of sturdy alloy layers. The dwarves would soon run into a wall. Those sturdy alloy layers had to be attacked by high-energy magic cannons. Similarly, I am not worried about the enemy's mages and dragons. Emmett accidentally exposed a weakness. It is obvious that the enemy wants to obtain the results of the research regarding the new gods that we goblins have been researching in the first district. That is why they won't make a big move and destroy this underground research center. Perhaps they could send out a few saint-level magicians to create a large-scale magic spell. A single forbidden spell would be enough to create a small-scale earthquake, causing our underground cave to completely collapse. However, I believe that they wouldn't do such a thing. That is because in their previous attacks, they haven't used any powerful destructive magic spells. They are only using the most conventional methods to attack us. The results of the research in the Creation God District are something that they must obtain. The 20th day after entering the first district. Because we can't see the sun in the underground cave, we can't tell the time. We can only tell how much time has passed by based on the clock. After living in the underground cave for a long time, we are facing a new problem. More and more goblins are showing signs of mental abnormalities. Despair, depression, and other emotions are causing the goblins to break down. We don't have enough doctors, and we lack medicine to treat mental illnesses. I can only tearfully order for the goblins who have gone crazy to be temporarily isolated. The goblin in charge of monitoring the situation told me that the sounds of explosions are getting closer. I'm afraid that the enemy has already made a breakthrough. I am very surprised because the enemy's speed of advancement is far beyond my expectations. Could it be that they have transported new magic cannons so quickly? The 20th day after entering the first district, the sounds of explosions and the tremors underground are becoming more and more obvious. I no longer need the monitoring goblins to report back to me. Every single goblin, including me, can clearly feel these movements. Today, 2 researchers have died. They died in an accident during the research process. The way they died was very strange. I couldn't see any wounds on their bodies. According to the research team, the new god that we have cultivated possesses powerful mental attacks. This is a type of attack similar to mental magic. Although the new god is still in its infancy state, it has already begun to have some self-awareness. Occasionally, it will instinctively release some mental attack. In such a situation, every time we get close to it, it will become a dangerous task. This situation is similar to a sleeping goblin. When it has a nightmare, it will release a dangerous attack. You can't tell when this sleeping goblin will suddenly have a nightmare. The latest report given to me by the monitoring team shows that if there are no accidents, our outer defensive gate can only last for about 10 days. This is the result obtained from the sound of explosions. The 35th day after entering the first district. With a feeling of despair, I am tired of waiting. Since the enemy will come in sooner or later, let that day come quickly. I no longer have any expectations for the birth of the new god in the first district, because after many times of questioning, the research team finally told me that they are unable to determine when the new god will mature and awaken. This process is completely dependent on the growth rate of the infant new god. Perhaps it will wake up tomorrow, or perhaps in another 10 years. How laughable. This god that we have created, I have already started praying to it before it was even born. God, please wake up quickly. The 39th day after entering the first district. Today, the innermost gate began to be attacked directly. The sound of a huge explosion brought panic to all the goblins. I ordered all the combat goblins to prepare for the final battle. The last gate was breached in the afternoon. The first enemy that rushed in made me understand why they were able to break through so quickly. Goblins. I actually saw goblins. A group of goblins wearing goblin armor and wielding goblin weapons rushed in through the gate. Our soldiers were stunned for a moment, but this momentary daze quickly cost us more than 100 corpses. When I came back to my senses and ordered a counterattack, the soldiers began to fight with anger. Goblins. There are actually goblins working for these damned enemies. These bastard traitors. They betrayed our race. They actually surrendered to the enemy. We were still guarding the gate. We fought back and forth for that small opening. In the afternoon, I ordered an explosion, causing the cave near the gate to collapse and block the opening. But there were goblins working for the enemy. This fact made all the goblins in the cave furious. No wonder they could break through so quickly. Because in this world, only goblins are proficient in engineering and are proficient in controlling all kinds of goblin precision machinery. The enemy had already made use of a group of goblin traders who surrendered to them and used our technology and machinery to dig here so quickly. I've already ordered everyone to gather together in preparation for the arrival of the final moment. The 40th day after entering the first district, the collapsed area was excavated. However, the expected battle didn't happen. The dwarves in charge of excavating didn't attack us immediately. Instead, they quickly retreated. A shout came from outside the cave. I could tell that it was Emmett's voice. He wanted to talk to me again. I only wanted to hear what he wanted to say, so I agreed to his request. However, I didn't expect. Emmett came out of the cave. I stood there with a fuse in my hand. I could cause the cave to collapse at any moment. Emmett understood me well. When he saw the thing in my hand, he shouted to me, "You better wait. Just a moment." Then I saw her. I definitely didn't expect that I would be able to see her again. Even when I heard that some refugees had escaped before the fall of the capital, I only imagined that she might still be alive. However, in my heart, I knew that she most likely didn't have the chance to survive. But today, when she really stood in front of me, I was completely stunned. Queen Lulu, the goddess of my heart, the love of my heart. Her eyes were still so pitiful. Her green skin was still as lovely as the green wheat seedlings in summer. She stood there and looked at me with sorrow. Her expression was mournful. Emmett stood next to her and told me in a loud voice that he had found Lulu among a group of captive refugees. If he hadn't found her, Lulu would have died. I know. As your former friend, I know you well, Couriette. All these years, you have always loved her in your heart, Emmett said. Emmett said loudly to me, "Have your subordinates surrender immediately, and my previous promise will still be valid. Your subordinates can all live, and you can even have her." At that time, I stood there and looked at Lulu quietly. I looked into her eyes. Lulu also stood there. She looked at me, and then she began to smile. Her smile was still as beautiful as when I peeked at her from afar during the banquet. There was no trace of fear in Lulu's eyes. Her smile was so peaceful. She said to me, "I remember you, General Couriette. I remember that I attended your investiture ceremony." Her voice was so calm and serene. I was very excited, but my heart was growing more and more fearful. Then she said to me, "I heard this elf say that you have always loved me. This makes me feel very honored. Please don't misunderstand. I just feel that at this time, you, as a brave general who has led our race to continue fighting, as a noble goblin, to receive your love is a great honor." I was still speechless. Lulu looked into my eyes. She said to me, "If you truly love me, then please allow me to make a request." At that time I was really scared. I couldn't imagine if I would have had the willpower to refuse Lulu if she had really asked me to surrender. However, the words she said to me were not those. "If you truly love me, then please promise me to continue your mission. Our kingdom has fallen, our race is on the brink of extinction, our loved ones have died, but our pride will not disappear. Honorable General Couriette, if you still have the pride of being a goblin, then no matter what your previous orders were, please complete them. Complete the final pride of being a goblin." Her words moved Emmett, and I saw with my own eyes Lulu turn around and run towards the nearest enemy behind her, snatching away his weapon. I also saw the enemy's sword pierce through Lulu's neck. Her beautiful head gently fell to the ground, green blood spurting out. I don't remember how I went crazy after that. I only remember that I ordered the explosion at the entrance of the cave, and the cave collapsed and blocked it. I also don't remember how I was taken back by my subordinate. Right now I am awake. I am writing this diary. There are tears in my eyes, and my hand holding the pen is shaking. Lulu, my beloved Lulu, please believe in me. I will fulfill your request and complete the final glory of being a goblin. You have only walked ahead. Day 42. We have built a defensive line in the cave, but I know that this won't buy us much time. Today, I suddenly gave a crazy order. I originally ordered the remaining explosive weapons to be buried in the test area. If we fail, then I will personally detonate them. I would rather have the results of this research be blown up than leave it to the enemy. But today I changed my mind. The defensive line outside can't hold on much longer. The sounds of battle are getting closer and closer. My warriors are bleeding, and my comrades are dying. I gave the goblins of the experimental group an order. Wake it up! It doesn't matter if it has finished growing, it doesn't matter if it has matured, it doesn't matter if it meets our requirements. The goblins of the experimental group tried to refuse. He told me that the connection to the new god's consciousness is not complete. If I wake it up now, it might not be able to distinguish between friend and foe. The awakening of a powerful weapon that can't differentiate between friend and foe facing them. I didn't listen to their advice. I repeated my order, wake it up. Immediately. When the leading expert of the experimental group turned on the switch, all the goblins trembled. They were wavering between anticipation and despair. As for me, I stood there and slowly wrote down the records on it. Perhaps this will be my last diary entry. Damn that Yimit. I learned the habit of keeping a diary from it. If I succeed in awakening it, if it can really protect us, I will kill Yimit with my own hands. Kill that bastard. Now I stand here and wait for the final result. I don't need monthly votes. I need recommendation votes. I need recommendation votes. Please don't find it troublesome. Move your fingers, click a few times, and vote for recommendation votes. Recommendation votes don't cost anything. It only takes a few seconds of your time. I beg you. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 212. GOR Chapter 199. Rupture. I have been thinking about a question. Shea exhaled, and his tone seemed to be very serious. What question? Dora gave a dissatisfied harumph. What is the god that the goblins created like? Or is it the ending of this diary? No, 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 no. Shea shook his head again and again. There was a very serious expression on his face. There is no need for me to think about the ending of the story. He pointed at the skeletons around them and sighed. These respectable fellows are all dead. As for the goblin civilization, we have all seen it for ourselves. They have become a bunch of filthy and ignorant brats who only know how to call themselves Okioke. From this point alone, I feel that they are very pitiful. Then, what is the question that is troubling you? Shea seemed to smile. It's you, Dora, it's you. Me? The female dragon appeared surprised. Yes, you. Shea's voice did not sound like he was joking at all. Frankly speaking, I am moved by the story in this diary. I feel that these ancient goblins are a group of people worthy of respect. What about you? Dora, a pure dragon, a race with faith and shackles. I am very curious. When you read this story, what do you think? Dora was silent. You believe in God, but what does that mean? Does it mean that your will is firm? Does it mean that your heart is strong? But look at this diary. The smile on Shea's face disappeared and his expression grew increasingly solemn. Look at this goblin general known as Kuriat, his adjutant and that Princess Lulu. Look at those words. Only walking in the front, the final glory will not disappear. Dora, what I want to ask you is, do you think that these goblins who do not believe in God, this race, their hearts are really empty? Are they really weak? I feel that the strength in their hearts is even stronger than ours. If so, do they really need to believe in God? Dora remained silent. Leaving Dora speechless, Shea seemed to be very satisfied. He chuckled a few times before continuing, All right, Dora, continue telling me the rest of the story. No more. What? Dora's voice was very stiff. That's all. Shea was stunned. What did you say? What do you mean by that? Is there something wrong with your ears, or is there something wrong with your comprehension? Dora's voice was laced with sarcasm. Didn't you hear the end of the previous entry? Perhaps this is my last entry. In other words, this was the last one. There's no more content after that. Shea didn't believe it. He picked up the booklet and looked at it. Sure enough, the page above was indeed the last page recorded. The page after that was blank. Bloody hell, this story really has no end. Shea opened his mouth. We can already guess the result. Dora sighed. These gnomes are dead. And Shea fell silent. The two of them didn't say anything. After a while, the two of them exclaimed at the same time. Spiritual attack. That's right, spiritual attack. Aside from the traces left behind by the corrosion of time, the skeletons of the ancient gnomes were still intact. There were no external injuries or damage. This was clearly an abnormal way of dying. If they did not commit suicide by ingesting poison, then they must have died from a spiritual attack that would not leave any external injuries. Could it be the god created by the gnomes was awakened and released by them? Then, the indiscriminate attack ended up killing these gnomes? Shea's brows were tightly knitted together. There are two very obvious problems. Dora was also puzzled. The first problem is that according to the diary, these gnomes were trapped in the first zone, which is an underground cave. This place is clearly not an underground cave, but a mountain stream. Although there might have been some changes in the landscape after 10,000 years, an underground cave wouldn't have turned into a mountain stream for no reason. Moreover, as you can see, these gnomes are clearly warriors. There are no non-combat members. So, Shea immediately nodded and quickly said, so, the place we are standing is not the first zone mentioned in the diary. In other words, the Kuriat gnome general in the diary brought his army and successfully walked out of the underground cave. Due to some unknown reason, he came here and died here. Yes, Dora said in a blunt tone. The second problem is the god of the gnomes, or rather, the powerful weapon created by the gnomes. Haha. Shea could not help but sneer. Dora, oh Dora, you are a smart and far-sighted person, but you still refuse to admit that the thing created by the gnomes. Haha, you refuse to call that thing a god, is that right? How could a god be created? Dora immediately retorted without hesitation. Perhaps the ancient gnomes created a powerful existence, a powerful weapon, but I do not think that thing is a god. Then what do you think a god is? Shea crossed his arms and sneered. A god is... Dora was suddenly at a loss for words. See, you can't answer this question. Shea shook his head. All right, I won't argue with you about this. Even if we argue for a few days, we won't be able to come to a conclusion. Now, let's just talk about the interesting things in front of us. The god created by the gnomes. Dora muttered that thing in a low voice. Where is it? Or rather, does it really exist? Has it really been awakened and is it still alive? Shea pointed at the skeletons around them. I think, based on the state of death of these gnomes, we can guess that the god of the earth has been awakened and killed these ancient gnomes. I think we can make such a judgment based on their cause of death. Then, there are more questions. These gnomes died here and not in the first zone. Then, did they bring the god of the earth out of the first zone and into the outside world? There were too many similar questions. After all, that diary was just a diary. It was a record written by the gnome general called Kuriak when he was still alive. Therefore, it was very likely that something happened after the time recorded in the diary. The gnome general called Kuriak obviously did not write down his subsequent experiences in the diary. Or perhaps he was no longer in the mood to write a diary. But the problem was that this diary recorded the sad and tearful ancient gnome civilization. Although he only saw a brief glimpse of it through the brief fragments in the diary, the story deeply attracted Shea. Even a country bumpkin like him had to admit that the ancient gnomes were a group of people who deserved respect. Their tragic end was also pitiful. This story had attracted Shea, but unfortunately, the diary did not give an ending. Unwilling to give up, Shea began to search around the mountain stream again, hoping to find more clues from the skeletons of the ancient gnomes. He walked around the mountain stream for a while, searching everywhere, but did not find any valuable clues or items. Shea made a rough calculation. In the hundreds of meters in the mountain stream, there were more than 3,000 skeletons of the ancient gnomes. This was also a problem of numbers. According to the diary, the number of the last gnomes in the creation god area in the first zone was obviously much higher than this number. Just as Shea was searching carefully with ample patience, Sharba and the others on the mountain stream finally lost their patience. Shea had wasted too much time below, and the people on the top began to worry. Sharba shouted loudly with his thick voice. After urging him a few times, Shea had to give up the search. He returned to the place where he came down, found the tree vine on the mountain wall, and then shouted again, asking the people on the top to pull him up. Back to the mountain stream, Shea climbed up and sat on the ground, panting heavily. Looking at Sharba, Todoro, and the other 3 mercenaries, he laughed loudly and said, "Damn! You can't imagine what I found below." Walala, Shaya took out all the helmets, armors and weapons he had picked up from the goblin's skeleton and threw them on the ground, quickly causing Sharba and others to be surprised. After all, they were all warriors. These strange armors and weapons quickly made Sharba see something different. "Light the torches. Let's go down and have a good look." Shea looked at the people in front of him and said, "Guys, this is a huge discovery." After discussing, everyone gathered the remaining tree vines. Everyone wrapped the tree vines around their waist, and the other end was tied to the tree above. Shea left 2 mercenaries on the top to be responsible for guarding, and at the same time, to be responsible for hanging everyone down. He took Sharba, Todoro, and a mercenary and went down to the bottom of the mountain stream. This time, he made some preparations and prepared enough torches. After returning to the bottom of the mountain stream, Todoro, Sharba, and the mercenary were immediately stunned by the scene in front of them. Sharba was attracted by the armors worn by the ancient gnomes. The spherical armors had strong defensive power, and the complete shape was obviously not handmade in the blacksmith's shop. As for Todoro, he immediately pulled Shea in front of a broken magic cannon. Although this guy was only a dabbler in magic, he had studied in a magic academy. His knowledge of magic theory was not bad. When Todoro saw the magic cannon, he screamed and almost pounced on it. He hugged the thick barrel and shouted excitedly, "God! God! My God!" The mage's voice trembled. "This is a magic cannon? God! This is actually a real magic cannon. Look at the magic patterns on it. This is actually a miniature version of a magic array. These things are powered by magic. Look at this magic array, it obviously has fire and wind symbols, but I can't see anything else." "How much can you see?" Shea stood at the side and asked. "How much?" Todoro screamed. "I can't see much at all. It's too advanced. Master, it's really too advanced." The muscles on the mage's face were trembling. He took a deep breath and stared at the magic cannon. He whispered, "Master, perhaps you don't know much about magic, so you can't understand how amazing this thing is." Todoro's eyes could not leave the magic cannon. He quickly explained, "According to the magic theory we have now grasped, our human mages can already arrange a very advanced magic array. But the biggest problem is that the arrangement of the magic array is very complicated. Almost all the magic arrays are large-scale. The more powerful the magic array, the bigger the shape. This is because more magic crystals are needed to provide the reserve energy. But look at this magic cannon. Its size is only so small. Moreover, it has shrunk the magic array into such a small shape and engraved it on the cannon. Let me put it this way, according to the current standards of our human mages, if we arrange a magic array of this size, the power of this magic array is at most equivalent to a low-level magic, such as a small wind spell. But this thing, it is a magic cannon. A powerful magic cannon. Such a small magic array can satisfy the energy requirements of such a powerful weapon. This is too amazing." After a pause, Todoro continued, "But this is not the most amazing thing about it. It is the fusion of several different types of magic. Look at this magic array, it is not a single type, but a fusion of fire and wind. Please forgive me, with my level of attainment, I can only see these two types. Perhaps there are others that I can't see. But this is already very amazing. To be able to perfectly fuse different types of magic power together without rejecting each other, and to be able to produce a huge amount of energy, this is something we can't do right now. Is it really impossible? Shea rubbed his chin. Of course. Todoro's tone was resolute and decisive. Even if you call the chairman of the Magic Association, which King Merlin of Lantis, and all the Grand Magi of the continent, you still can't do this. Very good. The country bumpkin suddenly laughed. Sharba? Sharba! What? Sharba stood up from afar, holding a goblin helmet. You guys, Shea said with a smile, look around carefully. Find a way to lift up all the magic cannons you can find, even if they are rotten beyond recognition. Ah, and those demonic flames, those small iron pipes, move them as much as you can, as much as you can. Ah. Shah Urba agreed without hesitation. Then everyone began to search the mountain stream carefully. They collected all the magic cannons they could find, or things that looked like magic cannons. There were a total of 4 of them. As for those small magic fires, there were a lot more of them. There were about 300 of those strange iron pipes that they could find. With such a large pile of iron pipes piled together, it didn't look small at all. Collecting all these things took them almost half a day. Sharba and the others were even more interested in armor and other things. Shea was a little troubled. How are we going to transport these things out? This is a huge problem. Sharba and Todoro also looked at each other. Let's not worry about this for now. We can slowly discuss when we go up. Let's think of a way to get the magic cannons up first. Shea sighed. Everyone stood at the bottom of the mountain stream. When they came down earlier, they had let go of the vines and hung on the side of the mountain wall. Now that they were about to go up, Sharba immediately shouted loudly, indicating to the 2 mercenaries that had stayed on top. However, no matter how hard Shah Urba tried to shout, there was no response from the top of the mountain. Shea furrowed his brows and glanced at Sarba. Both of their expressions were somewhat unnatural. Hey, Carlos, Gully, are the 2 of you asleep? Hurry up and say something. We are going up. Sharba shouted a few more times, but there was still no response from above. There was no wind in the mountain stream, but the valley was very dark at this moment. Even though there were torches to illuminate the place, everyone suddenly felt a sense of uneasiness. This dense cold air seemed to attack everyone's back. In addition, there were the skeletons of the ancient gnomes lying around. This scene was undoubtedly somewhat frightening. Something is wrong. Sharba and Shea looked at each other. Shea immediately handed the torch to Sharba and jumped up the mountain wall. He pulled on a tree vine and shouted, "People up there! Say something!" Shea still did not get a response, but then Shea pulled on the tree vine with a whoosh. The tree vine was immediately pulled down by him. The tree vine fell and soon, the long tree vine fell into the mountain stream like a snake. In the end, when all the vines on the top fell down, one of the ends of the vines was carrying something else. When he saw what it was, Theodore couldn't help but shriek out loud. "Ah! Shut up!" Sharba fiercely knocked on the magician's head and immediately pulled out the short axe. His face was full of anger. Damn it! Shea's face was also extremely ugly. Because, on the other end of the tree vine that fell down, there was an arm. One hand was still tightly holding onto the tree vine, but the arm had been neatly cut off from the elbow. The bloody cut was very smooth. Obviously, it was made by an extremely sharp weapon, and the clothes on the arm were obviously not of someone else, but of the mercenary's companion. Everyone, we really need recommendation tickets. Recommendation tickets, as long as everyone is registered on Chidien, then everyone will have a few votes every day. You just need to spend a few seconds to vote. This request is not too much, so please, everyone, help. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 213. GOR Chapter 200. Psionic storm atop the green-colored tree vines was a badly mutilated arm. At that moment, this scene was more bizarre than anything else. Everyone's faces turned ugly to the extreme. Sharba rushed forward and pulled off the arm. After giving it a glance, he whispered, "It's Carlos. This fellow was injured before. His little finger is broken. I recognize it." Their hearts were beating wildly. They didn't know what had happened up there. Seeing the arm here, they thought back to how they had been unable to get any response to their calls earlier. It was likely that the two mercenaries who were guarding up there had met with misfortune. However, they had been staying under the valley all this time. Although the mountain stream was steep, it was only tens of meters high. If something had happened, they would have been able to hear it by shouting loudly. However, just now, they had been busy at the bottom of the mountain stream and had not heard any warning from above. The two mercenaries could be considered as veteran warriors. Yet, they had been silently killed off? Shea showed no hesitation. "Everyone, go up. We cannot split up again." There was no telling just how many dangers lurked within this dark forest. Shea was unwilling to let his remaining subordinates split up again. Thankfully, after pulling the other tree vines, there were still two that were not broken. Shea was the first to climb up while Sharba followed behind him. The two of them became even more cautious, and they deliberately slowed down their climbing speed. It took them twice as long to climb up the cliff. Shea was the first to climb up. Then, he rolled on the ground and stood up with the flaming fork in his hand. He assumed a vigilant posture. Next, Sharba jumped up as well. The two of them stood back to back and looked around nervously. At that moment, the sky had turned completely dark and there was no light coming from above. The two mercenaries who had been guarding up there had died. The two torches that had been inserted into the ground were now lying crooked on the ground. The flames had long since been extinguished and the two mercenaries' corpses lay beside the tree vines. Shea was a natural night owl. With a glance, he was able to get a rough idea of what had happened. The corpses of the two mercenaries were lying on the ground, but what was shocking was that the corpses had been ruined beyond recognition. The two of them were perfectly fine, but they were cut into 7 or 8 pieces. Severed arms and broken branches rolled everywhere. Blood dyed the grass on the ground red and black. The blood had already coagulated. There was another mercenary whose chest had been neatly sliced open by something sharp. His internal organs were splattered everywhere, and his intestines were pulled out as well. Half of his body was lying there. Looking at this scene, even Shea couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He tightened his grip on the fiery fork. Then, both of them carefully looked around. There was no movement. Shea reignited the torch and stabbed it into the ground. Sharba turned around and threw the vines into the mountain stream, dragging Todoro and the last mercenary out. When the two people behind him came up, their faces were also pale. Todoro could no longer stand and almost sat on the ground. What kind of thing did this? Sharba and Shea carefully examined the corpses. Both of them were at a loss. The wounds on the corpses were very neat. Even a sharp sword might not be able to leave such neat wounds. Shea carefully examined the ground. The underbrush was messy, but he didn't see any footprints of giant beasts. Only a patch of underbrush was pressed down by something, and a long drag mark was left behind, all the way into the depths of the forest. Shea followed the trail for a while, and after dozens of steps, the drag mark inexplicably disappeared. Could it be something that can fly? Shea was somewhat worried. Even if we encountered a powerful monster, the two brothers above should have at least warned us. But they were killed without making a sound. Sharba couldn't figure it out. Shea's face was solemn. He touched the bloodstains on the ground and estimated. It has been quite some time. They should have been attacked not long after we went down. When we were down there, did you hear anything strange? Sharba shook his head. I didn't either, we didn't hear anything. Shea frowned. That doesn't make sense. Even if another group of hypertoxic lizards or a giant fanged spider came, the two brothers would not have been killed without even making a sound. At present, there were only 4 people left in their group. Shea led them to bring out 10s of torches. After lighting all of them, they stuck the torches into the ground to form a circle. Shea then personally went down to the mountain stream. He brought up several iron pipes filled with magic flames and several helmets and armor left behind by the gnomes. Although the armor was too small, they could still put on the helmet. There must be something dangerous here. Shea whispered to his companions. It is now nighttime. If we continue on our way now, we will be walking through this dense forest at night. If that thing notices us, it will be easier for us to be ambushed. The terrain here is slightly more spacious. We will wait here until dawn. If that thing comes again, this spacious area will be easier for us to attack. If it does not appear again, we will wait until dawn for the visibility to improve before continuing on our way. The few of them had a ball of fire in their hearts, but they didn't know how many dangerous magical beasts there were in this godforsaken forest. They had no choice but to suppress the tension in their hearts and wait quietly. None of them slept that night. They leaned against each other and rested in the middle of the circle of torches. Shea was the most awake. It wasn't until the latter half of the night that a gust of wind began to blow, causing the flames on the torches to sway back and forth. Shea and Sharba leaned against each other. Suddenly, an inexplicable sense of oppression appeared in their hearts. A strong sense of uneasiness surged within them. He quickly grabbed the fire fork and pushed Sharba with all his might before jumping up. Sharba immediately raised his head while holding his axe. He looked around and asked, "What is it?" Shea's heart thumped wildly. That feeling of uneasiness grew stronger and stronger. It was as if there was a stone weighing down on his heart. Finally, he felt something and suddenly pointed in a direction within the forest. There! Following Shea's finger, everyone leaned together and looked in that direction. They saw the sound of branches breaking coming from the thicket in front of them. It was as though something huge was slowly moving out from the thicket, crushing everything in its path. Finally, the thicket suddenly split apart and a huge black object slowly emerged. Then, with a gentle sweep, a small part of the thicket was easily swept away. Shea was able to clearly see that it was a huge sickle-like pincer. Its edge was incomparably sharp. With a gentle sweep, it flattened a part of the thicket. Then, a thick and huge body emerged from the thicket. It was as though it was forcibly squeezing out from the dense foliage. Little by little, the huge body emerged. The 4 of them who were standing within the circle of torches were completely dumbfounded. The flickering light from the fire illuminated the monster's body. The surrounding sound of the wind and the rustling of the thicket could be heard. However, at that moment, the 4 of them could seemingly hear their hearts beating wildly. Finally, the monster's body completely crawled out from the thicket. Shea could not help but curse out in a low voice. "Damn it! Son of a bitch! This son of a bitch!" The eyes of the 4 of them turned round as they stared intently at the thing. The huge black-colored body was covered with a layer of shiny black armor. Its long body crawled out and crouched low on the ground. 2 rows of huge legs crushed the thicket on the ground. On both sides of its head were 2 thick and huge pincers. However, the most frightening part was not the 2 huge pincers with sharp edges. The most frightening part was the monster's tail. The segmented tail was raised high up in the air and was bent. The tip of the tail was a bulging section in the shape of a half-moon. A sharp spike was protruding from the tip of the tail. The spike was as long as a short spear. The monster before them was shockingly a huge black scorpion. A scorpion with a body bigger than a bull. That was not all. What caused the hairs on their bodies to stand up was the body of the scorpion. At the top of the torso, it was as if a person had grown out of it. However, it was as though the human body had not fully evolved. It was as though the god of creation was too careless when creating this creature. The upper part of the torso resembled a human body. However, it also appeared as though it was pieced together in a hurry. The proportions and shape were strange, and the outline was not clear enough. The most frightening part was the head. It was clearly the head of a scorpion. However, it had clear facial features similar to a human's. Although it was somewhat blurry, the distribution of the eyes, mouth, and nose were the characteristics of a human face. Ah! A shrill scream rang out. The one who screamed was Todoro. Magicians were the most cowardly. However, the moment he screamed out, Shea slapped him on the head. The slap nearly caused Todoro to bite off his own tongue. What are you screaming for? Shea's face was ferocious as he looked at the two giant pincers of the giant scorpion in front of him. On the edges of the pincers, there were clearly traces of solidified black blood. There were also a few blood clots hanging on the serrated blades, and some fibrous fragments remained. Clearly, it was human clothes. Seeing this, Xiao was immediately sure of one thing. It was this thing that killed the two mercenaries who were left on top of the tower. What are you waiting for? Kill it! Shea roared. Sharba was the first to make a move. Wielding two short axes, he was the first to throw them out. The two short axes were thrown out, the blades of the axes gleaming with a cold light. However, the giant scorpion merely moved its body slightly. Its two giant pincers waved and easily deflected the axes. Next, the scorpion raised its body up high. Seeing its posture, Shea immediately shouted, "Spread out! Hurry up and spread out!" Just as he finished speaking, the giant scorpion had already pounced ferociously. Its enormous body moved at an extremely fast speed. It was as though it was sliding along the ground. Its body directly scraped down the few torches on the periphery. The four of them desperately spread out. The giant scorpion's pincers had already descended. After scraping down the last torch, its body turned around and extinguished the torch. Attack! Sharba! Attack its body! I will lure its pincers away. After Shea roared, he raised his fire fork and pounced forward. The giant scorpion waved its pincers down. Shea struggled to use his fire fork to block it twice. Then, he felt a gust of wind blowing against his face. The force behind the pincers made Shea feel as though he was a nail being hammered into the ground. The most frightening thing was that this scorpion's two giant pincers were flying back and forth. Shea's fire fork was already desperately trying to parry. After parrying 2 or 3 times, the scorpion's huge tail suddenly stretched down from above. Shea felt his heart tighten and he used all his strength to jump back. Bang! The giant scorpion's tail fiercely stabbed into the ground, right at the position where Shea was standing. The short spear-like tail completely pierced into the ground. When it was pulled out, it lifted up a layer of soil. At this time, Sharba and the remaining mercenary had already thrown out 2 short spears. However, when the short spears hit the scorpion's body, they were easily deflected by the black shell. Damn it! Such a hard shell again! Sharba angrily shouted. All of you back off! Shea helplessly roared. After taking a deep breath, his eyes emitted a red light. The crimson killing intent burst forth. In Shea's eyes, the giant scorpion's movement speed suddenly became much slower. He twisted his body and pounced forward again. The fire fork fiercely blocked the giant pincers. Then, a red line swept across the fire fork. The giant scorpion let out a blood-curdling scream. Suddenly, a small piece of its pincer was directly cut off by the fire fork. Shea's heart shook. He twisted his body again and took a few steps forward. His body quickly dodged the stab of the scorpion's tail. After rolling on the ground, he once again faced the scorpion's pincers and fiercely chopped down with his fire fork. This time, a crack sounded. After the shell of the giant pincers was cut open, the giant pincers immediately shortened by a small section. The giant scorpion raised its head and roared. The roar was filled with pain and anger. Its body suddenly shrunk, and its densely packed legs quickly wriggled. Very quickly, it retreated more than 10 steps to open up a distance between it and Shea. "Ha! Want to run?" Shea took advantage of the situation. How could he let the scorpion escape? He felt that although this scorpion looked somewhat disgusting, it did not seem too difficult to deal with. It was just that its body was huge and its shell was hard. It was much weaker compared to the giant tooth spider. Just as he was about to give chase, the scorpion quickly retreated to a sufficient distance and no longer retreated. Instead, it waved its pair of giant pincers and pointed its scorpion tail at Shea, assuming an attacking posture. Shea snorted and pounced forward with his fire fork. However, after just 2 steps, he suddenly heard the scorpion's roar change. Its tone seemed to have become sharper. Shea's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. Bang! As he was running forward, his body seemed to have bumped into something. Although there was nothing in front of him, it was as though he had bumped into an invisible wall. Shea felt a huge invisible force slamming into him and sending him flying backwards. With a thud, he landed heavily on the ground. The impact was so great that it felt as though his body had fallen apart. Damn it! Half of Shea's body was numb from the pain. He fiercely bit his lip. Wind-type magic? Condensed air to form a shockwave? No! Dora's terrified voice suddenly rang out in his mind. It's not wind-type magic. Shea, run, run, run! Dora's screams did not stop. Shea was struggling to get up when suddenly, an invisible force slammed into his body again. This time, Shea, who was on the ground, was thrown up and he was thrown back 7 to 8 meters. However, this time, Shea did not fall to the ground. Instead, his body was suspended in mid-air. Shea felt as though his entire body had been bound by an invisible force. He struggled with all his might but to no avail. His body was suspended in mid-air. It was as though there was an invisible force holding him there. That clump of power had tightly wrapped him up. Telekinesis. It's spiritual telekinesis. Dora's voice rang out in his mind. It's a spiritual attack. Shea, this thing knows how to use spiritual attacks. Spiritual attack? Shea's mind was somewhat dizzy and he was unable to react in time. At that moment, seeing Shea being strangely hung in midair, Sharba and the others dared not continue watching. They raised their weapons and roared as they charged forward. However, the human-shaped giant scorpion merely shook its head. Its mouth, which seemed to be a crack, released a few strange whistling sounds. This time, Shea was able to see it clearly. Sharba and the other mercenary who were charging forward with their weapons in hand suddenly flipped backward. After rolling a few times in midair, they fell to the ground. Then, the 2 of them were lifted up from the ground by an invisible hand. Although Sharba's legs were kicking wildly, his body floated up bit by bit. In the end, the weapon in his hand was thrown away. He could only float there, struggling non-stop. The other mercenary and Todoro were also floating up like Sharba. In the end, the 4 of them were floating in midair. It was as though they were tied up by layers of invisible ropes, unable to move. The most frightening thing was that Shea could not even scream. He felt as though his throat was being choked. No matter how hard he screamed, he could not make a single sound. This feeling was akin to having a nightmare while sleeping. In the dream, he was unable to move at all, nor was he able to make a single sound. At this moment, Shea finally understood how the 2 mercenaries who had been left behind were silently killed. The human-shaped giant scorpion's body swayed, and its head turned twice. The outline of its head resembled a human face. Finally, it stopped howling. The four of them were floating in midair. Suddenly, they felt their bodies loosen and fell heavily to the ground. After falling to the ground, Shea felt his entire body go numb. He could not exert any strength. He could not even feel his own hands and feet. Sharba and the others also fell to the ground, unable to move. Shea was struggling with all his might. His face was flushed red. In the depths of his mind, Dora's anxious voice quickly said, "Idiot! This is an invisible power. It's mental power. You don't need to struggle. Pay attention to your consciousness. Just like when you unleashed your crimson killing intent. Concentrate." Within Shea's eyes, a red light finally appeared. Suddenly, he felt a rumbling sound in his mind. Everything before him turned black, and he felt a splitting headache. However, following this intense pain, the numbness in his body suddenly returned. Shea cried out in pain and jumped up from the ground. He roared loudly and brandished his flaming fork, cutting down a large tree beside him. Hugging the tree trunk, he charged toward the scorpion. Bang! The human-shaped scorpion was smashed by the tree trunk and its body retreated. Shea roared madly as he hugged the tree trunk and charged forward. Finally, he leapt up and stomped on the tree trunk. He charged forward and arrived before the human-shaped scorpion in an instant. Brandishing his flaming fork, he was about to hack down. The human-shaped scorpion finally raised its head. The strange human face faced Shea, and Shea felt another rumbling sound coming from the depths of his mind. Following this rumbling sound, Shea felt as though his consciousness was being viciously torn apart by some power. It was so painful that everything before him turned black. Next, a wave of mental power knocked him back again. His body flew back for over 10 meters and broke a large tree that required 2 people to hug. Only then did Shea land on the ground. This time, he could no longer stand up. All the bones in his body felt as though they had been broken. A wave of power once again swallowed up his senses. His body was numb, and he could no longer feel his limbs. He lay on the ground. Forget about moving, he couldn't even blink his eyelid. The giant scorpion furiously raised its giant pincers to pry open the tree trunk and slowly crawled out. It stood there and looked at Shea, then looked at the other 3 people. A sharp whistling sound came from the human-shaped giant scorpion's mouth again. This time, for some reason, the whistling sound became extremely ear-piercing. The moment the whistling sound entered their ears, they felt as though 2 sharp needles were ruthlessly piercing their ears and into their brains. That sharp, piercing pain instantly caused their vision to turn black. Then, all of them were the same. Blood flowed out of their ears and nostrils at the same time. This feeling was as though an external force had suddenly poured into their consciousness. Their consciousness was originally like a pool of calm water, but a huge stick had suddenly reached in and violently stirred it up. They all felt as though their heads were about to explode from the pain. Their consciousness was no longer under their control. For a moment, hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, and all sorts of strange feelings surged up at the same time. It was as if countless thunderbolts were continuously ringing in their ears, blasting their hearts until they felt like they were about to explode. And losing control of their consciousness made them feel as though they were about to go crazy. All sorts of fear, anger, hatred, and all sorts of negative emotions surged out and violently mixed together, becoming more and more chaotic. In the end, all of them were lying there, madly opening their mouths and roaring. Their faces were filled with malevolence and pain, but no matter how much they roared, they couldn't make a single sound. Shea was also lying there, his body trembling and spasming. His face was distorted. In his mind, Dora anxiously roared, her voice already distorted. "Calm down, Shea. Calm down. Control your consciousness. Focus your mind. Damn it. This is a psionic storm. You must focus your mind to fight against it. Calm down. Use your crimson killing intent to focus your mind. Damn it. There's a new chapter tonight. Please recommend it. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 214. GOR Chapter 201. Good luck. All four of them were gasping for breath. They were like fish that had jumped out of the water as they gasped desperately for breath. Their faces were contorted and the veins on their necks and foreheads were bulging out. Their mouths were wide open but no sound came out. Shaya could clearly hear Dora's anxious shouts in his mind, but compared to the auditory hallucinations caused by losing control of his consciousness, Dora's voice seemed to be too weak in comparison to the thunder-like rumbling in his mind. The human-shaped scorpion slowly crawled toward Shaya. Its huge body cast a shadow over Shaya's body. The scorpion straightened its body and used one of its legs to kick away the flaming fork that Shaya had thrown to the side. The flaming fork flew far away and fell into the mountain stream. Next, the scorpion swung its huge scorpion tail. The sharp stinger on its tail exuded a chilling light as it stabbed down viciously at Shaya. A clear sound rang out as the stinger of the scorpion tail stabbed into Shaya's chest. Shaya immediately bellowed out as the massive force behind the stinger pushed his body deep into the ground. This stinger from the scorpion tail made Shaya feel as though he was being trampled by a galloping horse. That was especially true for his chest. The massive force behind the stinger caused him to clearly hear the sound of his ribs breaking. It was so painful that his vision turned black. Thankfully, he had Dora's dragon scale on his chest. Although the stinger from the scorpion tail carried a powerful force, it was unable to pierce through the dragon scale. Instead, the massive force behind the stinger caused Shaya to cough out blood. The giant scorpion appeared furious at the fact that it was unable to pierce through Shaya. Due to the excessive force exerted by the stinger on its tail became bent. Seeing this result, the monster appeared furious. It also felt some pain. It took 2 steps back and used its sharp pincers to clamp down on Shaya. The 2 barbs on the sharp pincers pierced through Shaya's legs and his body hung on the pincers. Under the intense pain, Shaya's body trembled violently. The feeling of pain washed over every hair on his body, and his mind cleared up somewhat. Blood gushed out from his mouth as he struggled to break free from the pincers. The giant scorpion had already lifted Shaya up. Shaya was clamped between its huge pincers. It seemed that as long as it continued to clamp down, it would be able to break this prey in two, but at this moment, a strange roar suddenly came from the thicket. That roar was sharp and ear-piercing. It carried some kind of dizzying power. A gray shadow jumped out from the thicket with a whoosh and pounced onto the back of the giant scorpion. Its claws pressed against the scorpion's back, and it lowered its head to viciously bite down. The giant scorpion seemed to have been thrown into a difficult situation by this sudden attack. It finally opened its pincers and flung Shaya far away. When Shaya landed on the ground, his body violently collided with the ground. In that instant, it was as if all the restraints on his body had disappeared. His consciousness returned to his body. Although he was still in intense pain and the 2 places where his legs had been pierced were badly mangled and fresh blood was flowing out, he twisted his body to see a shocking scene. The thing that had just rushed out from the thicket to save him was struggling to lie on the back of the scorpion, frantically biting and tearing at it. That thing had a tough, horny skin. Although its gray body was majestic, it was 2 times smaller than this gigantic scorpion. In terms of size, it was obviously at a disadvantage. Furthermore, its sharp claws and fangs were obviously ineffective against the scorpion's thick black shell. Its claws and fangs tore at the black shell with all its might, but it only managed to scratch out shallow traces. When its fangs tried to bite, it only managed to produce futile caw-caw sounds. Shea saw clearly that the thing that had run out to save his life was none other than a huge lizard. It was the mount that originally belonged to Ozwa of the Zaku people, the howling lizard. In the last battle, this lizard was injured and was let go by Ozwa. After the Zaku people were all wiped out, this guy never appeared again. Shea originally thought that it was dead, but he did not expect it to suddenly appear at this time. The howling lizard opened its mouth and roared. Because of its innate ability, its roar carried a kind of magic similar to sound attacks, which had the effect of making creatures fearful and even unconscious. But obviously, this ability did not have much effect on the human-shaped giant scorpion. The lizard's futile hoarseness could not penetrate the scorpion's shell. The sharp howls only made the giant scorpion even angrier. Finally, the giant scorpion rolled its body, suddenly scurried towards the thicket next to it, and then quickly climbed vertically up a big tree. Its movements were swift and agile. After climbing to the trunk, its whole body had completely turned over, throwing the lizard off its back. The howling lizard fell to the ground and let out a muffled groan. But then, without waiting for the howling lizard to get up, the giant scorpion had already turned over and pounced on it. It used two huge pincers to clamp the howling lizard, and then the scorpion's high tail fell. With a poof, the long stinger of the scorpion's tail pierced directly into the lizard's body. The whistling lizard's roar suddenly became shrill. It struggled to open its mouth and even stuck out its tongue. Its body twisted weakly a few times, but the giant scorpion's stinger not only pierced its body, but also nailed it to the ground. The giant scorpion's pincers pulled hard, and the lizard's two front claws left its body. Mucus and blood sprayed everywhere, and the lizard's struggle quickly weakened. It opened its mouth, and blood gushed out of its mouth. "What the F***ck are you waiting for?" In Yang Ming's mind, Dora roared frantically. Xiao, who was still in a state of shock and sluggishness, was finally awakened by Dora's roar. Seeing that the shrieking lizard had been knocked down by the giant scorpion's fatal attack, Xiao struggled to get up. Although the area where his bones were broken almost made him fall down, the country bumpkin groped around on the ground and grabbed something in his hand. He only felt that it was a stick of metal. After holding it in his hand, he retreated a few steps. With a low roar, he pounced towards the giant scorpion with all his might. In midair, he simply opened his arms. The red light in his eyes engulfed his upper body in an instant. The giant scorpion seemed to have felt Shea's attack. It released the pincers that clamped the lizard and twisted over. However, the tail was stuck in the lizard's body, and the howling lizard was suppressing the stinger of the scorpion's tail while twisting, so the giant scorpion could not pull out its tail for a while. It could only wave its pincers to hack at Shea in midair. At this moment, Shea's eyes were empty, and only the red light jumped like flames. In midair, facing the giant scorpion's pair of giant pincers, he suddenly twisted his body lightly like a fish. He bent his body abruptly and slid directly through the gap between the giant pincers. With a puff, Shea almost hugged the giant scorpion's torso. At this moment, he could not care so much. The metal stick in his hand also stabbed the nearest place fiercely. "Dragon! Stab!" Shea roared in desperation. It was the first time he used Dragon Stab without the fire fork. As soon as this stab was used, the strength of his whole body crazily rushed into the metal stick in his hand like a tide. In an instant, the red light in Shea's hand shone brightly. The red light was like flowing blood. The metal stick stabbed into the giant scorpion's body. At first, it was blocked by the hard black shell, but soon, under the blood-like red light, the black shell seemed to soften. It seemed to have some kind of corrosive ability. The red light first pierced a little, and then the rest of the red light crazily squeezed into the scorpion's body from that point of breach. Shea hugged the scorpion's torso with one hand. His expression was as ferocious as a demon's, and his other hand held the metal stick and stabbed it fiercely. He did not notice that after using Dragon Stab, The metal stick in his hand had disintegrated in an instant under the red light. It was like a melted popsicle. In the red light, the original metal texture turned into a mass of liquid, turned into a red flame, and finally flowed into the scorpion's body. Plop! Shea finally exhausted his strength. He fell to the ground and saw the huge scorpion retreat continuously. On its disgusting head, its mouth opened and let out a sharp and painful roar. The tone of the roar became lower and lower. On the back of the scorpion's torso, a small piece of black shell suddenly bulged up high, like a big bag. Finally, with a bang, it directly burst open. A mass of red mist spread out brilliantly. In the explosion, flesh and blood splattered, and the shell was directly blown to smithereens. A huge hole at least 1 meter in diameter was opened on the scorpion's back. Suddenly, a large amount of disgusting liquid flowed out from inside. The giant scorpion let out a roar of despair, which quickly turned into a whimper. Its huge body staggered a few times, trying to retreat, but after a few steps, it finally fell to the ground. Its body quickly curled up into a ball. In the end, its breathing weakened, and gradually, it stopped moving. Shea had exhausted all his strength. His vision gradually blurred, and finally, bit by bit, he lost consciousness. His vision completely turned black. When Shea woke up, he felt his face dripping wet. In his daze, he thought at first that it was raining. Raindrops fell on his face, but he subconsciously tried to raise his hand to wipe the water off his face. When he raised his hand, his body was slightly affected, and a huge tearing pain made him instinctively scream. The pain stimulated his consciousness. He forced his eyes open and saw the sky above his head. It was bright, and the dazzling sunlight made Shea subconsciously close his eyes again. But then, with his eyes closed, he felt a shadow covering his face again. When he opened his eyes, he finally saw the scene in front of him. A huge leaf was placed over his head to block the dazzling sunlight for him, and the person holding the leaf was his wretched mage servant, Todoro. Todoro's face was covered in oily sweat, and there was a drop of sweat on the tip of his nose. The sweat mixed with the dust, making his face look funny with black and white patches. His hair was messy, and his eyes were full of fear and anxiety. The mage held the leaf in one hand to block the sunlight for Shea, and held a wet handkerchief in the other hand. He squeezed water out bit by bit and dripped it on Shea's face. Seeing Shea open his eyes, Todoro immediately cheered. "Thank God! Almighty God! You're finally awake, master!" Shea wriggled his lips and confirmed that he was still alive. His first sentence was to say to Todoro in a weak voice, "Damn it, take the towel away, the water flowed into my nose." Todoro's face was full of joy. He cheered, jumped up, and threw away the leaf in his hand. Then, he hugged Shea and sat up. Only then did Shea clearly see that he was still beside the mountain stream. More than 10 meters in front of him, the giant scorpion's huge corpse was still lying there, but the blood had already dried up, and next to it was the lizard's corpse. Looking left and right, he saw Sharba and another mercenary lying under 2 big trees. Shea's heart tightened at first, but then he saw Sharba's chest rise and fall faintly, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. "They're not dead, master." Todoro saw Shea's eyes and hurriedly said, "They just fainted." "Fainted?" Shea muttered, and struggled to sit up straight. But the damned crimson murderous aura and the aftereffects of the dragon thorn made his whole body feel like it was falling apart. Even the slightest movement would cause him heart-wrenching pain. More importantly, his breathing was not smooth, because the ribs in his chest were broken. Every time he took a deep breath, his chest hurt so much that he almost fainted. Shea suspected that the broken ribs had pierced his lungs. The 2 places on his legs that were pierced by the giant scorpion's pincers had been bandaged. Judging from the coarse manner of bandaging, it was clear that this was Theodore's handiwork. Todoro looked very tired. He kept wiping his sweat with the back of his hand. The front and back of his clothes were soaked with sweat, and the drop of sweat on the tip of his nose mixed with snot made him look very pitiful and funny. But the magician seemed very happy, and immediately hugged Shea's leg, the one that was not injured, and burst into tears. "Master! You finally woke up. I was so scared. I thought I was the only one who survived. In this damned place, if I was the only one left, I would have no chance of surviving. Ho, luckily you didn't die, luckily you woke up." Shea sighed. "Todoro." The magician did not respond, so Shea could only raise his voice and shout again. "What, master?" The magician wiped his snot. "Your hand." Shea gritted his teeth. "Wipe your snot on my pants. Please note there is one more update tonight. Please vote. Please vote. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 215. Shea drank a bit of water and panted for a while. During this time, Todoro gave a brief account of what had happened after Shea fell unconscious. Shea had risked his life to use the dragon's tab to kill the giant scorpion, and there was a bit of luck involved in the process. If Ozwa's lizard mount hadn't suddenly appeared and attracted the giant scorpion's attention, then Shea wouldn't have had the chance to act. Then, not long after Shea fell unconscious, Todoro was the first to recover. As for Sharba and the mercenary, after the giant scorpion's psionic storm, they had been unconscious and hadn't woken up until now. After being the first to wake up, poor Todoro was terrified. His own abilities were too useless. In this place full of danger, if he was alone, the chances of him getting out safely was practically zero. Perhaps it was because of this that the always timid and cowardly Magus didn't immediately run away after waking up. In this place, even if he wanted to run, he couldn't run away. "You mean they've been unconscious all this time?" Shea turned over. Then, enduring the pain, he unbandaged the wound on his leg and applied some ointment left by the Zaku people. Then, he personally bandaged it. His technique was naturally much better than Todoro's. After that, Shea endured the pain that threatened to make him faint and checked the place where his ribs were broken. This process almost made him unable to hold on. Enduring the terrible pain, he straightened the broken bones that were in a slightly crooked position. After straightening them, the pain he felt after breathing lessened a lot. Shea was at least a little relieved. It seemed that the broken bones hadn't pierced his lungs. Todoro was still babbling about his panic, worry, and fear. After listening for a while, Shea finally became impatient. "Use your magic. Don't you have healing spells?" Todoro's face immediately turned ugly. Only when he saw Shea's face darken did Todoro hurriedly cry out, "Master, it's not that I'm stingy with my life spell, nor is it that I'm unwilling to use my life force. It's just that, you saw what happened last time. I can't control what kind of magic I use. It's purely based on luck and probability. Just like last time, I wanted to use life damage spell on the giant tooth spider, but the spell I released was life healing spell instead." Pausing, Todoro raised his eyelids and said pitifully, "So, I don't dare to use life healing spell on you. What if I didn't release a life deprivation spell, but a life deprivation spell? Then, with your current injured and weak state, what if I accidentally kill you?" After he said that, Shea had no choice. He admitted that Todoro was telling the truth. He didn't want to die at the hands of the powerful giant tooth spider or the vicious giant scorpion, but die at the hands of this cowardly and incompetent magician. After resting for a while, Shea looked at Sharba, who was still lying there. "But why haven't they woken up yet? It's reasonable to say that Sharba's body is much stronger than yours." "I don't know." Todoro was also at a loss. "I woke up a few hours earlier than you. But according to my guess, we've been unconscious for at least 2 days. 2 days? How can you be so sure? After all, I'm a magician. I've also done some experiments on living creatures. I judged based on the degree of decomposition of these corpses. At this point, Todoro was very embarrassed and smiled bitterly. There's one more important thing. When I woke up, I found that I was so hungry that I had no strength. Obviously, I've been unconscious for a very long time, because when I tried to stand up for the first time after waking up, my legs were so weak that my front teeth almost fell out. There was still some food left. Under the care of Todoro, Shea ate some food and drank some water. Gradually, he recovered some strength, but this time, the injury on his thigh was so serious that he couldn't stand up at all. If it wasn't for the fact that the Zakuta people's medicine was very effective, in this harsh environment, just the decay and infection of the wound would be enough to kill a person. But even so, from Shea's experience, the injury on his leg would take at least a month to recover. His left thigh was directly pierced in 2 places. Fortunately, the bone was not injured, but he lost a lot of blood, making his body look very weak. After confirming that his life was not in danger for the time being, Shea crawled to Sharba's side and carefully checked Sharba and the mercenary. There were no obvious wounds on the two. In fact, the battle with the giant scorpion was completed by Shea alone. Sharba and the others were quickly subdued by the giant scorpion's psionic storm at the beginning and fainted. But why didn't they wake up? When Shea was thinking about this problem with a frown, a familiar voice in his mind made him suddenly cry out in surprise. Idiot! Dora! Shea didn't care that Todoro was next to him and called out happily, Great, tell me, what happened to my people? Dora's voice was very angry, but because Shea's spirit was too weak, Dora's voice was not very clear and was somewhat vague and weak. You are an idiot, a brainless idiot. What did I say to you? I told you to run at the beginning. You idiot, you actually rushed towards that thing. You are simply courting death. If it wasn't for your good luck that makes me jealous, that thing would have killed you at least 10 times. Shea snorted. I don't want to quarrel with you about this. Anyway, I am still alive now. Tell me, what happened to my companions? Psionic storm. Don't you know what psionic storm means? This is a kind of spiritual attack, triggering all the negative emotions in the opponent's spiritual consciousness, completely detonating the spiritual power in the heart and making it chaotic. In order to recover, it needs a process. Only those with a strong and resolute mind will be able to recover faster. Oh? Shea was stunned for a moment. People with strong spiritual consciousness can recover faster? But Todoro was the first to recover? This guy was obviously a cowardly and wretched person, but he recovered faster than Sharba? This servant of yours, although he looks timid, his willpower is much stronger than others. Dora snorted in annoyance. This seemed to make some sense. At least, when Todoro said in an almost pious tone, Master, I am a magician. These words, Shea was also moved. The other two can only rely on themselves to slowly wake up, but I don't know how long it will take. Maybe it will be very soon, maybe they won't wake up in a month. This answer made Shea very depressed. On the other hand, Theodore, who was at the side, was completely stunned. The poor magician looked at Shea, who was sitting there talking to himself, as if he was talking to himself. Could it be, my master, he has gone crazy? Shea leaned on a tree stick and limped to the body of the giant scorpion, looking at the dead monster. At this moment, at close range, this thing looked more and more ugly, especially the torso that looked like a human body, but it seemed that because it had not fully evolved it looked more like a monkey than a human. What the hell is this thing? Shea shook his head. In his mind, Dora's voice sounded a little gloomy. Remember what was written in the diary, a spiritual attack. Shea's face changed. Wu Ran stared at the corpse. What you're saying, could it be? This thing is not made by the ancient gnomes. Of course not. Dora snorted. This thing is very powerful, but it was made by a race for more than 400 years. How could it be so weak and easily killed by you? But, this thing, I believe it must have something to do with the thing made by the ancient gnomes. Shea agreed with Dora's guess. This was indeed a bit too much of a coincidence. The group of ancient gnomes under the mountain stream did not have any scars, as if they were all killed by a spiritual attack. And the god, created by the ancient gnomes, was said to have a strong spiritual attack power. What was more coincidental was that they actually encountered such a monster in the valley that was capable of spiritual attacks. If this was just a coincidence, it would be too unreasonable. Shea poked the corpse with a tree stick. In the hole in the back of the giant scorpion, a disgusting visceral-like thing could be seen flowing out. The stench made Shea frown and cover his nose. Shea, I suddenly remembered a detail in the diary. I don't know if you noticed it. Dora's voice was a bit hesitant in his mind. Detail? What detail? Shea put away the tree stick and limped back to the tree to sit down. Do you still remember in the diary, the ancient gnome scholar, the one who participated in the research team in the first district, Sark, said something to the writer of the gnomes, General Kuriak? He revealed some of the characteristics of the thing made by the gnomes. Shea's heart skipped a beat. I remember that paragraph. They mentioned some of the words used. Evil, imperfect, ugly. Shea immediately said, I don't understand. Evil, can this thing be considered evil? As for ugliness, you know, the aesthetic standards of the gnomes have always been different from other races. Dora's voice was full of disdain. Bah! You have the nerve to criticize other people's aesthetic standards. Idiot! I meant imperfect. Imperfect, this detail is what I'm talking about. I still don't understand. What do you mean by imperfect? Shea asked frankly. Heavens! Dora seemed to be moaning. If I still had a body, I would be so angry that I would stomp you to death. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance, Shea retorted without holding back. Dora seemed to be speechless for a long time. Finally, she slowly began to explain. First of all, no matter the religion of the clans, humans, elves, dwarves, and even our dragon race, all gods, these great existences all have one thing in common. That is perfection. And this perfect image comes from the sacredness and nobility of the gods. Do you know where this sacredness and nobility comes from? I don't know. Lao Tzu never believed in these things. Naturally, he wouldn't study these things. Shea quickly shook his head. Desire, the desire of greed. Dora's tone gradually became serious. Creatures of any race, even the elves, who are considered the noblest and most elegant race, all have their own desires. As ordinary creatures, we all have our needs, our desires, and our innate greed. There are emotions, there is love, there is hatred, there is desire, there is greed. We have all the emotions, but the biggest one is greed. Greed comes from desire. As creatures, desire is nothing more than divided into two parts. One is survival, and the other is reproduction. As higher creatures, we are not like those ordinary beasts. We have already sublimated these two parts of desire. The desire to survive is no longer just satisfied with living. Instead, it has increased the need for more enjoyment, food, shelter, and transportation, as well as the desire for power and so on. These can actually be summed up as the desire to survive. But for higher creatures like us, this desire is no longer limited to how to survive. It has become how to survive better. As for reproduction, I think it's not hard for you to understand. It's mating. Reproducing the next generation so that the race can continue to exist. It can be said that desire is common to all creatures and is also universal to us. However, gods, the reason why gods are higher than us is because of a very big characteristic. They are sacred and noble because of an important reason. They have no desires. Because they have no desires, they appear even more sacred and noble in the eyes of the ordinary creatures in the world. Gods do not need to eat, gods do not need to be greedy for wealth, gods do not need to wear luxurious clothes, gods do not need to hold power. More importantly, gods didn't need to reproduce. Because gods, every god is an eternal existence. Therefore, they do not need to reproduce, and they have no desire to reproduce. This gives them a sense of cleanliness and purity. It is not just a matter of material cleanliness, but also a matter of spiritual cleanliness. Therefore, they are perfect. Then, let us deduce it in reverse. The so-called perfect is the absence of desires and needs. Then, what about imperfection? Is it the same as having desires and having needs? Having desires and needs? Shea thought for a moment and suddenly blurted out. You mean, you still don't understand? Based on this deduction, this thing refined by the ancient era is imperfect. In other words, it needs to eat, it needs to enjoy its body's survival, it might even need to reproduce, mate and reproduce. Shea could not help but glance at the giant scorpion. Suddenly, he shivered. You mean, this damned thing might be descendants. Look at the time, it's almost April 1st. Everyone, please give me a guaranteed monthly ticket for April. Leave the writing to me, the results will depend on everyone. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 217. GOR Chapter 203. Three-leaf gold emblem. Hearing Dora's words, Shea was unable to stop himself from shivering. Descendant? God's descendant? Shea's eyes widened as he stared at the monster's corpse and swallowed his saliva. I know what you are thinking, kid. Dora spoke in a casual tone. First, you need to understand something. That thing created by the goblins cannot be called a god. It is just a powerful creature that was created. Thus, there is no need for you to feel guilty about killing this fellow. Guilty my ass. Shea pursed his lips, his expression appearing as though he had a toothache. Even if it is a real god, if it wants to kill Lao Tzu will stab it with a blade. Besides, to kill off such a thing. What I mean to say is, what you are saying is too outrageous. It is not outrageous at all. Dora's tone finally turned serious. You need to understand something. For any god, the creation of a sense of holiness is very important. The reason why gods are higher than ordinary creatures is because they possess this sense of holiness. I understand that, Shea said casually. Gods do not need to eat. Because they do not need to eat, they do not need to shit or pee. This is very important. If everyone were to think that gods also need to shit or pee, what is there to be holiness about? As for reproduction, can you imagine the scene of your dragon god and a female dragon doing it together? If you were to think about that, I fear that everyone would no longer have much respect for these so-called gods. I'm warning you, kid. You are not allowed to blaspheme the dragon god with your words, Dora protested angrily. Dora appeared to be angry for a moment. After some time, she continued, You are simply misinterpreting my words. What I mean is, almost all gods do not have gender. For example, the fairy god, the dragon god. In the myths and legends that we believe in, the description of the gods does not specify whether they are male or female. In other words, there is no such thing as a gender in the gods. Shea was silent for a while before he said, What you said seems to be the case. However, in the beliefs of humans, there is a distinction between male gods and female gods. That's just a symbol. A god is a god, and a god can transform into any form. The so-called male or female is just what you humans imagine or add a symbol to it. In fact, it's like what you said to me before, no one has really seen them. Shea smiled. Heavens, it's not easy for a guy like you to say something like that. Could it be that my previous words have shaken your faith? Of course not. Dora said seriously, I still believe in the dragon god and its greatness, but perhaps in some ways, my understanding has sublimated a little because of your words. Shea used the tree stick to poke the corpse of the human-shaped scorpion. How do you think this thing was reproduced? Could it be that the god created by the goblins mated with the scorpion? Or is it originally a scorpion, but it mated with a human? Humph, idiots will always be idiots, Dora said with disdain. Must it mate in order to reproduce? Do you still remember that saying, life will always find a way out? Perhaps the thing created by the goblins was originally a human-shaped scorpion. Only, it was much more powerful compared to the one we encountered. Shea coughed. Where do you think that thing is? We killed one of its descendants. Will that thing seek revenge on us? Ha! That is assuming that thing is still alive, Dora sneered. Do you think that thing can live for 10,000 years? Maybe. Shea smiled maliciously. It's a god created by the ancient goblins. Just as Shea stood beside the corpse of the human-shaped scorpion and argued with Dora, poor Todoro had completed a difficult task. It used vines to place itself at the bottom of the mountain stream and found Shea's fire fork among the skeletons. It picked up the fire fork from the bottom of the mountain stream. Todoro carefully searched among the skeletons. The poor mage felt his calves twitching. Surrounded by the skeletons of the goblins, the mage had to silently chant the name of the god in his heart, praying and cheering himself up. The skeletons of the goblins in the mountain stream had been messed up by the previous search. Todoro spent more than half an hour before finally finding Shea's fire fork. Obviously, when the fire fork fell, it stabbed into a skeleton. It was the skeleton of a goblin that had fallen to the ground. When the fire fork fell, it directly stabbed into the skeleton's back, looking like a flagpole. Todoro prayed as he walked over. He carefully held the fire fork and strenuously pulled it out. Unfortunately, Shea's fire fork was too heavy. The poor mage used all his strength and struggled for a while before a bang was heard. He grabbed the fire fork and fell backward. When he fell to the ground, Todoro's head hit a stone. He immediately saw stars and cried out in pain for a while before he struggled to sit up. But when he saw the fire fork in his hand, Todoro almost screamed again. When the sharp fire fork was pulled out, it directly cut through the skeleton. The fire fork actually lifted up the skull of the skeleton. Looking at the skull of the goblin that was pierced by the fire fork, Todoro felt his hands go weak. He hurriedly swung the fire fork with all his might to shake off the skull. When Todoro stood up with the fire fork, he rubbed the swollen back of his head with one hand. But after taking 2 steps, he tripped and fell to the ground again with a plop. The light at the bottom of the mountain stream was not very good. After Todoro fell to the ground, he raised his head and saw a pair of skeletal feet in front of him. The tip of his nose was almost sticking to it. The mage shrank back in fear. When he got up, he finally saw clearly that there was a goblin skeleton sitting in front of him. If Shea were standing here, he would recognize that this skeleton was the place where he found the diary of the goblin. In other words, the skeleton sitting here was the owner of the diary, Goblin General Curiate. There was also a metal box on the ground. It was the thing that stored the diary. After Shea took the diary, he did not take the box away. At this moment, Curiate's skeleton was still sitting there, just as it was when it was first discovered. In order to show respect to the goblin who wrote the touching diary, Shea fixed its head back to its original position and let it continue to sit there. And the box was placed next to Curiate's hand. Perhaps it was just a random thought in his mind, or perhaps it was purely out of curiosity. Or perhaps it was just a coincidence that the light shone upon the surface of the box. In short, due to a very coincidental reason, Theodore saw the box. Then, by chance, the Archmage picked up the box. The weight of the box was not heavy. Compared to its metal feel, it was surprisingly light. Perhaps the ancient goblin's level of metal smelting was far beyond that of modern humans. Todoro subconsciously looked at the box. He could not identify the texture of the box. Anyway, it was an unidentifiable metal. Maybe it was worth some money. This was Todoro's truest thought. It had to be said that this was a very accidental coincidence. Because Shea had seen the box, his attention was attracted by the diary in the box. When Todoro got the box, he was only attracted by the possible value of the metal box itself. In his opinion, the value of the box was nothing more than gold and silver. However, after opening the box, Theodore's hand accidentally touched the inside of the box. Suddenly, he was attracted by a certain discovery. The inside of the box was full of bumps and bumps. Theodore was stunned for a moment. However, upon closer inspection, the interior of the box appeared to be smooth like a mirror. However, when he touched the surface of the box with his fingers, there was no need to doubt the protrusions of the box. What was going on? The Archmage was stunned for a moment. He simply sat on the ground and used his two hands to carefully explore the inside of the box. After a moment, he understood one thing. First, his feeling was not wrong. The inside of the box was full of bumps and bumps. Second, these bumps and bumps could not be seen with the naked eye due to some strange technology, but they could be felt. The Archmage thought of ancient goblins, magic fire, magic cannon technology, and other possible things. His heart immediately beat wildly. He subconsciously looked left and right. Of course, there could not be anyone in this mountain stream. Todoro took a deep breath. He wanted to hide the box in his clothes at first, but then he dismissed the idea. If he found this thing and secretly hid it for himself, if it was discovered by Master Shea, he was afraid that he would end up in a bad situation. Todoro thought for a moment and finally came up with an idea. He dug out a clump of soil from the ground and then used the water bag that he carried with him. He poured out some water and stirred up some mud. Then he carefully smeared the mud on the inside of the box. Then he found a piece of white paper from the cloth bag. Finally, he used the white paper to paste the inside of the box. He did this very carefully. When he finally used the white paper to copy the bumps and bumps in the box, a clear pattern appeared on the white paper. Because of the ancient mud, these patterns were not very beautiful, but at least they were very clear. Todoro squinted his eyes and carefully looked at these patterns. He looked for a while and felt a little disappointed. Obviously, this pattern did not seem to be a blueprint for making weapons. It looked more like a map. There were some characters that he could not recognize on the side, but it was obviously the ancient goblin's language. Todoro immediately found a pen and paper, and carefully drew a copy of this picture. He checked it twice and made sure that he did not make any mistakes before he sighed in relief. The magician poured out some water and carefully cleaned the traces of mud in the box, leaving nothing behind. Then, he burned the paper that was printed with the mud. As for the clear copy, he carefully hid it in his bosom. After doing all this, he felt guilty as a thief and swallowed his saliva hard. At this time, probably because he had spent too much time under the mountain stream, Shea's roar came from above. "Todoro! You guy, did you fall asleep down there?" The magician immediately became nervous and hurriedly shouted, No, I'm coming up." He touched the picture in his bosom again, then took Shea's fire fork and the box and walked back to the place where the tree vines were tied. When Todoro climbed up, Shea was very impatient. He looked at the magician with dissatisfaction and said, "What are you doing down there?" "I fell down." Todoro timely gave a reasonable explanation. Because of the mud on his body and the big bump on his head, Shea did not suspect anything. He just smiled and said, "Well, you should be more careful. Where's my fire fork?" Todoro handed over the fire fork. Shea was very satisfied. He took the fire fork and carefully wiped it a few times. Then he nodded and said, "Very good. Thank you, Todoro." The magician hesitated for a moment and finally handed the box over. "Master, I found this thing." Shea took a look and recognized that it was the box where the diary was kept. He smiled and said, "Oh, this thing, I've seen it before. Well, is there a problem?" The texture of this thing is a little strange. I think it may have some value." From the magician's stammering tone, Shea could hear Theodore's intention, but he didn't care and smiled. "Well, this thing may be able to sell for a bit of money. If you like it, it's yours." The magician was relieved, but he could not help but secretly scold himself. If he had known it would be so easy to get it, he would not have drawn a copy below. Just as he was considering whether to tell Shea about the picture hidden in the box, Shea waved his hand and said, "Go get something to eat, Todoro. It's already noon, I'm starving." Lunch was some roasted meat and dry food. Although there was the body of the human-shaped scorpion in front of him, Shea did not have the courage to taste it. God knows if it was poisonous. The body had been dragged into the bushes. Shea did not want to look at a pile of corpses while eating and affect his appetite. The barbecued meat was the prey they had caught in the woods 2 days ago. After being barbecued, an alluring fragrance wafted out. Shea took a deep breath and said with a smile, "Theodore, although your magic skills are very poor, your cooking skills have greatly improved. When we go back, I think you can be my head chef." Todoro laughed dryly. He grabbed a handful of salt and sprinkled it on the roasted meat. Shea personally poured some meat soup for the unconscious Sharba and the mercenary. Although he did not know when they would wake up, but at least he could not let them starve to death while unconscious. But just as Shea grabbed the roasted meat and was about to bite into it, he suddenly heard 2 cha-cha sounds coming from the bushes. This sound immediately made Shea's ears stand up. His heart leaped to his throat. If another monster were to appear at this time, not to mention a giant tooth spider or a human-shaped scorpion, even if a hypertoxic lizard were to appear, then he was afraid that he would really have to die here. He could not move now. Sharba and the others were unconscious. The only one who could move was Todoro. It was obviously unrealistic to rely on this trash to defend against the enemy. The sound coming from the bushes caused Shea to quickly put down the roasted meat and grab the fire fork. He nervously stared in the direction of the sound. Todoro's face was also pale as he leaned on Shea's side. Finally, the bushes slowly parted and a hand reached out from inside. After pushing aside the branches, a figure slowly walked out. It was actually a human? Clearly, the person who walked out from the bushes was a human. Moreover, to Shea's relief, this person was clearly a person from a civilized world. Because this person was not wearing the leather jacket of the Zakuta people. Instead, he was wearing a white silk robe of high quality. The silk robe was also embroidered with gold. Other things aside, just the pair of sharkskin boots on his feet would be worth several gold coins outside. Not to mention the translucent water orchid diamond used as a button on his robe. Despite the large size of the white robe, it was clear that the person who walked out from the bushes was a female. Due to the large robe, her figure appeared very graceful and the robe did not completely cover up the curves of her body. When he saw the person who walked out, Shea was stunned. How should he put it? This woman was very strange. She was dressed as though she was a person of high status. However, she was walking through this dangerous forest without any weapons in her hand. More importantly, her boots were very clean. They were polished to a shine without a speck of mud on them. Her clothes were also spotless. She had clearly come out from the bushes, but there was not even a speck of grass on her clothes. The most important thing was, of course, her appearance. Her face was very beautiful with delicate facial features. Her appearance could be said to be very beautiful. With such a face and smooth and delicate skin, she appeared to be in her 20s. However, her eyes were too unique. Those eyes were like an ocean, filled with wisdom and worldly wisdom. It was as though they had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Generally speaking, those who possessed such eyes should be at least 3 to 4 times their age. His eyes were indifferent and full of calmness, but also seemed to be able to see through everything. His eyes didn't seem very sharp or aggressive, but with just one look, you would have a feeling that this guy must be very smart, the kind that is top-notch smart. Similarly, among all the people Shea had met, there was only one who possessed such a similar temperament. That was his teacher in name, Cavashir, the old monster. Let's put it this way. The woman standing before them looked like a female version of Cavashir. However, her long hair was as white as her robe, so white that not a speck of dust could be seen on it. Facing the dumbfounded gazes of Shea and Todoro, the woman in white robes smiled. It was a very gentle smile. Then, she opened her mouth. Her voice was equally gentle and pleasing to the ears. Even the way she spoke was similar to that old bastard, Cavashir. "Good afternoon, little fellows." The woman smiled. "I am very happy to meet you all here. It would appear that you fellows are having lunch. I wonder, do you have any extra food that you can share with a passerby like me?" Shea and Todoro. The way she spoke made it seem as though they were not meeting in this damned forest. Rather, they were meeting each other in a picnic in the outskirts of the forest. "Sigh." The woman sighed. "Did I scare you fellows? I nearly forgot. According to the etiquette of the secular world, I should have brought out something to exchange for food with you fellows." She gently rubbed her forehead. Then, she reached one hand into the sleeve of her other hand. After searching for a moment, she revealed a troubled expression. I do not have the habit of carrying money with me. What should I do?" After searching for a moment, she suddenly smiled. "Got it, this thing is made of gold. Maybe it is worth some money." She pulled out something from her sleeve. It appeared to be a small badge, and she tossed it over to Shea and Todoro. The item was indeed made of gold. After being tossed onto the ground, it shone with a golden luster under the sunlight. There were 3 uniquely shaped oak leaves with a small symbol in the middle. When Shea saw the item, he did not have much of a reaction. However, when Todoro glanced at it, his mouth gaped wide open and his eyeballs nearly fell out of their sockets. 3-3-3-leaf oak tree badge. It was a gold emblem with 3 leaves. Oh my God! Todoro rolled his eyes and nearly fainted. Shea gratefully grabbed Todoro and asked, "What is it?" "This item." Todoro looked at the woman with a frightened expression. What is it?" Shea shook Todoro in dissatisfaction. Old master." Todoro's face revealed an expression that was difficult to tell whether to laugh or cry. This is a magician's badge, generally speaking. A gold oak leaf badge is the symbol of a high-ranking magician. However, this badge has 3 gold oak leaves. 3 leaves. What does that mean?" Shea's expression turned stern. Great. Todoro suddenly became tongue-tied. Great magician. A number 1. The first day of the month. Vomiting blood to beg for monthly votes. Monthly votes. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.